Chapter 896. Master Cui was so understanding that Feng Zhen completed Jiang Pingji's task without much effort. He reported back to Jiang Pingji and told her the details of his meeting and conversation with the Cui family's master. Jiang Pingji thought about it and asked Feng Zhen, "Do you think this person is trustworthy?" She had the intention to support the aristocratic families in her camp, but that was just a piece of candy. If the Cuis knew when to stop, she did not mind letting the Cuis reap the benefits and become a rising power in Chongzhou. If they were greedy and wanted to take both sides, she would not tolerate the Cuis. "My lord, do you really think this person is trustworthy?" Feng Zhen thought about it and said seriously, "The Cuis started out as merchants. Because of their roots, they are not well received in Chongzhou. They are even lower than others in all aspects. My lord, you forcefully suppressed the aristocratic families in Chongzhou. For the Cuis, if the orthodox aristocratic families are suppressed, they will have a good opportunity to stand out. If my lord can support them, the Cuis will soar to the sky." Only when the aristocratic families in Chongzhou were suppressed could the second-class aristocratic families, or commoner families, have a chance to rise up. Under such circumstances, the Cuis could not continue to treat them like merchants. After all, they had seen Jiang Pingji's decisiveness and ruthlessness. Was it so easy to have a foot in two boats? If they were not careful, the boat would be destroyed, and the people would die. The Cuis were rooted in Chongzhou. They did not dare to take the risk. Jiang Pingji tapped her fingers on the table. After thinking for a while, she finally agreed. "You said that Cui Zhonghuan wanted me to give his little bean a name?" Cui Zhonghuan was referring to Master Cui. His surname was Cui, and his first name was Yu. His courtesy name was Zhonghuan. Regardless of whether it was Yu or Huan, they both had the meaning of light. It was a good meaning. Feng Zhen smiled. "Yes, but in my opinion, my lord should give him a nickname or a courtesy name that will be useful in the future. As for a proper name, it was better for Master Cui to come up with it himself." Feng Zhen had yet to experience Jiang Pingji's naming skills. He felt that his lord was well-read and had no problem with her literary talent. Reality proved that. "Give me a courtesy name or a nickname." "It's better to give me a courtesy name. It makes me sound more solemn. How about Bai?" Feng Zhen's mouth twitched. Qiguan Rang, who was handling documents, was even more direct. He accidentally pushed down a pile of bamboo slips. "Master, are you serious? If I remember correctly, isn't that the name of the Han Mei family's horse?" When he heard the name of the horse, Feng Zhen almost burst out laughing. "Who came up with such a stupid name?" Jiang Pingji smiled, her eyes shining with a teasing light. She said, "Of course it's to scare you. You might as well call it Fusho. I prepared this name for Huayu's family's second treasure, but looking at how he and Jingxian rarely spend time together, I think there won't be any good news from Huayu in the next few years. I'll give him another name in the future." With such a simple-minded name like Bai Bai, Feng Zhen didn't mind whether Fusho sounded good or not. After all, it had a good meaning. Perhaps this is the so-called vulgar is elegant. The name Fusho can also be used. To this day, Feng Zhen still did not understand a principle. Being well-read did not equate to having outstanding literary talent. His lord was actually illiterate. Compared to Feng Zhen, who was kept in the dark, Qiguan Rang knew the truth. He said, "It makes me feel that this longevity and Huayu's daughter, Changsheng, have a similar meaning." Both had a good meaning, but in reality, it was unbearably vulgar. Feng Zhen was puzzled. He signaled Qiguan Rang with his eyes, asking him to explain. Qiguan Rang said, "Simply put, if you don't want your child to bear an indescribable name, don't look for the Lord." Although it was an honor to be given a name by the Lord, it could not be done to the child, right? For example, Qiguan Rang did not look for Jiang Pingji when he wanted to name his daughter. Instead, he privately flipped through many ancient books. Who knew if the Lord would come up with names like Shuangxi, Ruan, or Shunfeng? He only had one precious daughter. Qiguan Rang could not bear to harm his daughter. Feng Zhen's expression. It was really hard to explain. The next day, the head of the Cui family, Cui Yu, personally visited. Not only did he bring his eldest son, but he also brought a big gift for Jiang Pingji. The Chui family's Pledge of Allegiance. Looking at the Pledge of Allegiance, Jiang Pingji had a better understanding of the current head of the Chui family, Chui Yu. He was a politician who had been delayed by business. Not only did he have a keen sense of smell and far-sighted vision, but he also had unimaginable courage and decisiveness. It was a pity that this kind of opportunistic businessman could only share blessings, not trials and tribulations, let alone a heart-to-heart. Once Jiang Pingji lost power, or was unable to bring more benefits to the Chui family, the Chui family would most likely look for a more suitable partner. After jumping ship, they would kick her out. The reason the Chui family was willing to accept the olive branch from Jiang Pingji was mostly because she had slaughtered a group of Chongzhou aristocrats. If she had not done that, the Chui family would still thank her for saving their lives, but they would never bet on her. Head of the Chui family, what do you mean by this? Jiang Pingji pretended to be puzzled. She looked at the land deeds and slave sale contracts that Chui Yu had presented. Her lips curled into a mysterious smile. Chui Yu said, "Now that the world is in chaos, the people have no way to make a living. At the critical moment of the country's crisis, those greedy vermin unexpectedly took the opportunity to exploit the people. They are the vermin of the country. I am alone and can't stop them. I can only do what I can to comfort them. I heard that the officials' benevolent and righteous move is to station fields at the border and train the army to defend against the northern borderline. It is really a blessing for the people of Chongzhou. I do not have a lot of assets, but I started my business with the people. How can I forget my roots? I only hope that the official will save the people from the disaster." The smile on Jiang Pingji's face grew wider. Everyone liked to hear compliments, and she was no exception. She had to admit that Chui Yu's business boasting was very pleasant to her ears. Jiang Pingji then picked up the account book and carefully looked at the things listed on it. The Chui family left behind the clan's sacrificial field, and even rented a portion of the fertile land that they bought at a fair price to her for free. Of course, the proportion of these fields was not large. The largest proportion was the fertile land that they bought from the people. However, compared to the previous aristocrats, the Chui family still had some conscience. Although they lowered the price, they only lowered it by 30%. It was better than those ruthless people who lowered the price by 30 or 40 times. Now, in order to gain Jiang Pingji's trust and be put in an important position, the Chui family gifted this portion of the land to Jiang Pingji. Apart from the fertile land, there was also a lot of uncultivated land. Most of these places did not have anything good, but they were vast and suitable as bases for the troops. Apart from that, there were many contracts that sold themselves. She roughly looked at them and realized that these contracts were all for the people of Chongzhou. Jiang Pingji raised her eyelids and looked at Chui Yu. She questioned him silently with an imposing manner. Chui Yu was stunned for a moment and immediately said, "Official, these contracts are for the people of Chongzhou who were sold to the northern borderline. The Chui family's words are light, and do not dare to provoke them. They can only secretly use their connections to secretly buy back a batch and send them to other places to be settled." After he said that, a smile appeared on Jiang Pingji's face again. Chapter 897. Chui Yu could not have asked for more. Only those of the same generation or elders who had a good relationship with him could call him by his courtesy name. Jiang Pingji's question was a hint of intimacy. If it had been another woman, Chui Yu might have misunderstood, but since it was Jiang Pingji, he dared not. There was no other reason. He did not realize that the other party was a woman, and even subconsciously ignored her. When he faced Jiang Pingji, he always had the illusion that he was facing the emperor. The prestige of the Tian family. Perhaps it's nothing more than this. Before he realized it, the back of his shirt was already soaked with sweat. A straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Since all of you think so highly of me, I naturally can't be stingy. Jiang Pingji accepted Mrs. Chui's pledge of allegiance without any psychological pressure. Next, it was time to let Mrs. Chui see her determination. Have you heard of the bamboo paper in Hejian County? Chui Yu's heart suddenly trembled. He was so shocked that his eyes went round and his tongue went numb. He almost forgot how to speak. Hejian bamboo paper? How could he not have heard of it? The Chui clan made their fortune through business. Although they already had some reputation and heritage, they were still merchants in the end, and were not taken seriously by others. The more it was like this, the more the Chui clan wanted to ascend to a higher level. Things like bamboo paper could only be touched by noble families. It wasn't that the Chui family didn't have the money to buy it, but they didn't even have the qualification to order it. He was anxious, and a bold idea circled in his mind. Could it be that Lu Shi was going to give up the profits from the bamboo paper? Even if it was just a piece of the cake, it was enough for Chui's to digest. However, this thought did not exist for long before Chui Yu forcefully suppressed it. Based on the intuition of a merchant, the woman in front of him could not be underestimated, nor could she be judged by the secular standards. For some people, the more you wanted something from them, the more they wouldn't give it to you. On the contrary, there might be a windfall. Chui Yu said, "The Hejian bamboo paper is a treasure sought after by all the famous people in the world. I have naturally heard of it." Jiang Pingji said, "My mother has been intelligent and quick-witted since she was young. The bamboo paper was created based on Kaiho's paper. Unfortunately, due to the limitations of the materials, they were unable to mass-produce them. His mother often said that bamboo paper wasn't something that only one family had. It's just that she's afraid that someone will use it to create trouble, so she's been hiding the craftsmanship of bamboo paper. It's not that she's selfish and doesn't want to teach it to others." Chui Yu had no way of verifying whether Gu Min had said those things, so he just let Gu Min say whatever she wanted. Chui Yu's heart skipped a beat, almost skipping a beat. He nervously swallowed his saliva. It was clear that he was already cheering in his heart, but on the surface, he had to maintain his composure. The implication of Jiang Pingji's words was very clear. She was satisfied with Chui's performance this time, so she allowed Chui to have a share of the big cake of bamboo paper. Jiang Pingji continued, "This is my mother's unfulfilled wish. As her daughter, I naturally have to inherit it." However, just like what his mother had been worried about, the biggest problem in mass production of bamboo paper was the raw materials. If we don't have enough raw materials, mass production will be useless. Hearing this, Chui Yu's heart sank to the bottom again. Great joy was followed by great sorrow. It was too exciting. Without waiting for Chui Yu to speak, Jiang Pingji sighed. "In order to fulfill my mother's dying wish, I personally went to investigate and experiment. I really found something that could perfectly replace the bamboo paper." He had started experimenting a few years ago, and the paper-making technology had already matured. As long as there are no problems with the raw materials, mass production will no longer be difficult. I don't say that everyone in the world can afford to use paper, but at least middle-class families won't have to continue using heavy bamboo slips. If Chui Yu's mood could be drawn into a picture, it would probably be like a roller coaster. The ups and downs could cause a heart attack. Jiang Pingji asked someone to bring a stack of cut rice paper. Chui Yu's eyes were glued to it. He had been modest before, but Chui's were rich. If they spent a high price and used their connections, they could always buy some from irregular channels. As the head of the Chuis, he had naturally used bamboo paper before. Just by looking at it, he knew that the improved bamboo paper that Jiang Pingji mentioned was not inferior to the quality of the top bamboo paper. If he could really get a share, would the Chuis just take a step forward? It was obviously a big step that would burst his crotch. Maybe Zhonghuan doesn't know, but I want to rebuild the Jinling Pavilion. Although I dare not compare with the Jinling Pavilion of the previous dynasty, it's not much worse. I plan to use this paper to bind all the books in the Jinling Pavilion. At that time, I will need a huge amount of paper. I dare not easily entrust this matter to someone who is not my confidant." Jiang Pingji said, "I wonder if Zhonghuan is willing to lend me a hand?" She said so much, but the last sentence was far more attractive to Chui Yu. He could not wait to nod his head and immediately answer loudly, "Yes, yes, yes." 1,000 times, 100 times he was willing. However, he had to be reserved. Thus, Chui Yu forcibly suppressed the excitement in his heart and said reservedly, "It's my wish, but I dare not ask." Jiang Pingji's face was full of smiles. The live stream audience was stunned. "Wudong King. What's this? Please translate." Luo Qing Yimo, It's just that I dare not ask for it. This is my wish. Shunfeng Express. I only care about one thing. The streamer won't hand over the paper-making technique so easily, will she? Jiang Pingji accidentally saw the bullet screen and could not help but laugh in her heart. Why would she do such a stupid thing? She clearly knew that Cui was a businessman. Why would she reveal her trump card at such a time? She agreed to let Cui's participate in the paper-making process, but she did not say that she would hand over the core technique. She would only use their manpower. When the rice paper was mass-produced and the paper's price came down from the altar, she would not mind handing over the technique to Cui's. Now, the rice paper was the carrot that she had hooked. It was specially used to lure Cui's, the greedy donkey, so that it would stare at the carrot to quench its thirst. Even so, Jiang Pingji's conditions were far beyond Cui's expectations. They were deeply grateful. Sometimes, when you give too much, people may not remember your good deeds. Only when you give them little by little will they know how precious the things they have in their hands are. Half a month passed like that. The city was still under martial law. The heavily guarded soldiers did not retreat. The few families that were under house arrest could not even hold a funeral. Many of the young gentry felt their buttocks burning. They could not sit still anymore. At this moment, two pieces of news bombarded the circle of friends of the gentry in Chongzhou. To be precise, the second piece of news was too important. In comparison, the first piece of news was insignificant. The first piece of news was that the Cuis of Chongzhou, whom they had previously looked down on, had boarded Lu Shi's ship. They had completely chosen to stand on her side. They did not care whether the Cuis stood on their side or not. In many people's eyes, they were just toads that were vainly trying to become one of the top aristocratic families in Chongzhou. The second piece of news was that the Cuis, who had chosen to stand on their side, handed over a proof of allegiance and obtained the right to sell the bamboo paper and rice paper from Lu Shi. What was even more shocking was that after 5 years of cooperation between the two parties, the Cuis could still obtain the production technique of the two types of paper from Jiang Pingji. Knowing the contents of the proof of allegiance that the Cuis handed over, the gentry clans beat their chests and stamped their feet. Chapter 898. Reality had proven that opportunities were only given to those who were prepared, and those who were extremely lucky. If one did not have European blood, then it was better to be prepared. Who knew when the opportunity would come? The incident with the Cuis quickly spread among the circle of friends of the gentry in Chongzhou. There were many who were envious and jealous. The group of people who were originally trembling with fear were now scratching their heads and thinking about how to get a share of the spoils. They did not ask for the same treatment as the Cuis, but they should at least get a share of the spoils. The gentry were used to reading people's minds. Jiang Pingji did not need to say it clearly. She only needed to let out some news, and they would follow the scent. Because of the exploitation of the fields and the slave trade, she relied on the fact that she had a strong army in her hands and ruthlessly attacked the aristocratic families of Chongzhou. Now that the Cuis were rushing to deliver the fields, she was all smiles and praised the Cuis greatly. She even had the intention to support the Cuis' rise to power. What did this mean? It meant that Jiang Pingji wanted to take back the fields that belonged to the people. If they did not give it to her, she would keep them locked up and see who could outlast the other. If Jiang Pingji was strong, the gentry would definitely stick together under the pressure of survival and work together to fight against her. However, the Cuis chose to rely on Jiang Pingji. Because of this, they gained huge benefits that far exceeded what they had invested. As a result, the gentry began to mutter in their hearts. Instead of killing 1,000 enemies and sacrificing 800 of their own, it would be better to fight for a win-win situation. Of course, those who had such thoughts were mostly from mediocre families. As for the gentry who flaunted their nobility, they would rather break than bend. Want them to give in? Sure, let Jiang Pingji personally visit them. Even if it was not 3 visits, she had to make 2 trips to give them face. Otherwise, there would be no discussion. With such thoughts in mind, different voices emerged in the circle of friends of the gentry in Chongzhou. Naturally, they could not stick together. Build virtue with kindness, build authority with strictness, reward for merit and punish for mistakes. This is the way to govern. Qiguan Rang finished his work and leisurely brewed tea for himself. Hearing the report from his subordinate, he smiled and said to Jiang Pingji, "My lord's tactics are becoming more and more sophisticated." Jiang Pingji snorted. Although she did not say anything, the curl of her lips revealed her feelings. Qiguan Rang knew that his lord was in a good mood. Her expression was just like his daughter's when she was praised by her parents. Jiang Pingji felt that her subordinates seemed to have misunderstood her. She tried to clear her name. "It's better to be straight than to do things. Your lord isn't the kind of stubborn person who won't turn back until she hits a brick wall. If being flexible can reduce trouble, I won't disdain to do it." Qiguan Rang smiled but said nothing. He had known Jiang Pingji for more than 6 years. It could even be said that he had watched her grow up. How could he not know the changes in her? Jiang Pingji was not anxious at all. She sat on the fishing platform calmly and smiled as she watched the group of fishes fighting for their own interests. The aristocratic families that she had placed under house arrest earlier were also dumbfounded. In their script, Jiang Pingji should be boycotted by the aristocratic families of Chongzhou. They should exert pressure on her and force her to submit. When Jiang Pingji could not take it anymore, she would release them from house arrest. They could then take the opportunity to guide public opinion and clear their names once and for all. Who could tell them what was going on? Why was reality so different from the script they had read? A loud bang broke the sorrowful atmosphere. The people who were sobbing softly were so frightened that they did not dare to make a sound. The gloomy and heavy morning hall was hung with white banners and white silk. A coffin made of gold-threaded nanmu was placed in the middle. Because the entire clan was placed under house arrest on the clan land, not only could they not hold a grand funeral, they could not even bury the coffin. After some inquiries, they found out that the aristocratic families of Chongzhou were wavering in their stance. The hot-tempered clan elder exploded on the spot and threw his cup in anger. "Son of the Lu family, you've gone too far." The white-haired clan elder was so angry that he was about to have a heart attack. The muscles on his face twitched strangely. "Clan elder, what should we do now? Lu Shi obviously doesn't want to let us off easily. Are we supposed to keep him under house arrest and prevent the old master from being able to rest in peace? It has been dragged on for more than 20 days. If it continues to drag on, I'm afraid it will be difficult for the deceased husband's resentment to dissipate." The widow wore mourning clothes and mourning clothes. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her delicate and pitiful demeanor added to her charm. The clan elder said fiercely, "Even if the resentment is difficult to dissipate, it's still seeking revenge on Lu Shi. Why are you panicking? Women just don't have any experience. Shut your mouth." Lu Shi knows that if he wants to snatch it by force, once he gives in, the consequences will be unimaginable. Can you bear such a huge responsibility? The woman had never had her own views. Her husband favored his concubine and neglected his wife. She did not dare to fight for anything for herself. Now that her husband had passed away and she had no children, she was even more helpless. As the wife of the royal family, she was scolded and insulted by the clan elder in public. In a daze, she looked at the coffin in the hall and cried even more miserably. She was not crying for losing her husband. She was crying for her dark and unknown future. She had no children, her husband was dead, and the direct line of descent was lost. She was no longer the wife of the royal family. Similar scenes played out in the various clans. One by one they scolded Jiang Pingji. They held onto the land in their hands and refused to let go. Jiang Pingji did not care much. With the Chui's pledge of allegiance, she received many more pledges of allegiance over the next few days. The land that she obtained was not considered fertile, but it was more than enough to train the troops, build a military camp, and set up a paper-making workshop. As for farming, she brought her people to investigate the field. She studied the situation at the borders and the geography of various places. She chose 4 key districts for farming. Because a few of the aristocratic families in Chongzhou were placed under house arrest, many places had vacancies. After Jiang Pingji picked and chose, she either threw the positions to the small aristocratic families that sought refuge with her, and let them have a taste of the sweetness, or She placed the people she had groomed in the positions and let them practice. After a round of beating and bestowing favors, the atmosphere in Chongzhou changed. Anyone who thought that they had 9 lives could come and see if she would kill them or not. Without this as a backing, who would give in to her? Jiang Pingji ruthlessly reorganized the forces in Chongzhou. She pulled in one group and beat another. Then she cultivated her own forces. She was having a lot of fun. Based on this situation, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou will suffer a great loss. Wei Xi received the news and was not surprised. TSK. Thinking about Hu County in his previous life, she was even more ruthless. She surrounded them at night and massacred the aristocratic families. It was a huge case that shocked the court. At that time, the prestige of the court was at rock bottom. The officials and the military pushed the blame to each other. Instead, she took advantage of the situation. She caused such a huge commotion. There were countless people who condemned her, but nothing happened in the end. In comparison, Chongzhou only lost a few leading aristocratic families. That was a blessing to their ancestors. Chapter 899. Wei Xi could not help but laugh. How could it not be refreshing to cut through the Gordian knot? This was his lord's usual style. He accidentally learned of the courtesy name Jiang Pingji had given to Cui Yu's eldest son. He was silent for a while. Fusho. This is a good name with a profound meaning. Wei Xi only said this and his emotions were in turmoil for a long time. However, the knot in his heart had been mostly resolved. He felt uncomfortable for a while before letting it go. Mr. Wei, my lord specially asked me to deliver a letter to you. It is now in your room. Wei Xi was surprised. He put down the bamboo slip in his hand and looked up at the messenger. His lord had a secret letter for him. It must be an important matter. How could she leave it in his room? Servants usually came in and out to clean. If he accidentally lost the secret letter and delayed his lord's important matter, what should he do? Wei Xi hurriedly put down his work and walked quickly to his room. There was indeed a letter on the coffee table. With a serious face, he removed the seal and picked up the letter inside. He opened it and read it. Wei Xi froze on the spot, as if his acupuncture points had been hit. Even his expression became unnatural. His ears were bloodshot. There were no important secrets written in it. But for Wei Xi, it was far more important than secrets. There were only 5 words written on the huge letter. The handwriting was strange. Each word looked round, but Wei Xi was very familiar with it. Whenever that person was in a very good mood, she liked to use this special style of writing. Zixiao, I miss you. Miss Wei Xi recovered from the shock and hurriedly got up from the table. He almost pressed down on his sleeves and staggered. He looked around guiltily. After making sure that there was no one, he folded the letter and stuffed it into the envelope. He secretly hid it in a brocade box. There was nothing special in the box. It was all Wei Xi's personal belongings that he brought with him wherever he went. For example, an old embroidered sachet, a painting he drew when he had nothing better to do, a brightly preserved rabbit fur cloak. Now there was another letter. He had originally wanted to place the letter on the top of the box, but when he thought of his bad friend by his side, he was afraid that there would be another scene of Feng Jin sleeping with him. So he stuffed the letter into the inner layer of his foldable cloak. It was like he was destroying a corpse, and then returning everything to its original position. Because of this letter, Wei Xi's state of mind was in a mess. He could not even sleep peacefully. That night, he had a very strange dream. When he woke up, he could still see the other person's lips moving in front of him. You can name the characters in the future. This was no longer a question of a name. It was a question of whether or not it was horrifying. Wei Siji asked himself, dreams are born from the heart. Could it be that I also have such rebellious thoughts subconsciously? He never had an answer to this question. My lord is in a good mood today. Could it be that those stubborn people are finally willing to give in? Feng Jin lifted his sleeves to hide his yawn. His eyes were almost squinted into slits, and the word sleepy was written all over his face. Jiang Pingji smiled. I had a good dream yesterday, so it was just a beautiful dream, causing him to be happy for nothing. Feng Jin pretended to pound his shoulders exaggeratedly and complained. If they still refused to admit defeat, Even if it's icy weather, the corpses that have been left there for more than a month will probably decompose by now. Why bother? They've already lost the best opportunity to resist, and now they're just struggling on the verge of death. A centipede dies, but it doesn't fall down. We can't let our guard down. We still have to be on guard. Jiang Pingji knew what the aristocrats were capable of. As long as she didn't completely beat them into submission or cripple them, as long as they bore a grudge, they would one day secretly bite back at her. If they knew what was good for them, Jiang Pingji could still let them struggle at death's door for a while. If they didn't, she could only use extreme measures to get rid of them all. She wanted to stabilize her power in the north, and someone had to be sacrificed. I know the severity of the matter. My lord, you can rest assured. This winter was destined to be turbulent for Dongqing. Jiang Pingji ruled Chongzhou and Hu County, and Lu Shi retreated behind the scenes. The heroes of the world responded in silence. They could see clearly that Jiang Pingji was now fully deserving of her position as the overlord of the north. If she could gain a firm foothold before the next spring and absorb as much of the connections and power that Lu Shi had left behind, no one in Dongqing would be able to compete with her. The fake Emperor Prince Changshu couldn't. The Su family from Zhe County couldn't. The Ming family from Sangzhou couldn't. And the imperial court that was struggling at death's door in Qinzhou couldn't either. Just the thought of her current territory made Dongqing's feudal lords breathless. She issued a recruitment order, built the Golden Scale Pavilion, gave books to the world's famous scholars, and was willing to write books for the world's scholars. No matter which one of these four matters were thrown out, it would cause all the forces to be in an uproar. Let's talk about the recruitment notice first. It wasn't something that just anyone could make. The first person was a sage 700 years ago. He sought talents for reform, swept away the chaos in the world, and stabilized the world. The second was the founder of the Xia dynasty. Under the advice of Prime Minister Huangfu, he built a platform to recruit talents. This was also one of the reasons why he could stand out in the chaos of the 16 kingdoms and unify China. If not for the recruitment order, the chaos of the 16 kingdoms could have continued for more than 100 years. Now, it was the turn of the daughter of the Lu family to follow the example of the sage. It was terrifying to think about it. Moreover, the construction of the Golden Scale Pavilion allowed the commoners to borrow books for free. This touched the nerves of many aristocrats and caused them to condemn them. However, even if they thought that the commoners were not qualified to read the books of the sages, they could not say it out loud. Therefore, they used the former Prime Minister Huangfu Xiu as a breakthrough point. He had been dead for hundreds of years. Because of Jiang Pingji, he was dragged out, verbally whipped, and killed by many aristocrats. Everyone said that Prime Minister Huangfu was a star of calamity. The chaos of the 16 kingdoms for more than 200 years was also caused by him. They cursed him for threatening the young lord, mobilizing troops without authorization, and even said that he established his own government and had the intention to rebel. If Xia Gaozong had not endured hardship and endured humiliation, how could he have killed the traitor? Looking through the history books, traitors ended up being dismembered and cooked. Lu Shi, who dared to imitate him in building the Golden Scale Pavilion, naturally would not have a good ending. After a round of scolding, those who did not know would think that Jiang Pingji dug up their ancestral graves. In conclusion, Jiang Pingji definitely had the intention to rebel. If she did not get rid of it now, she would definitely harm the people in the future. It would be too late by then. It was an impassioned declaration. It was a pity that there was only one group of people scolding. How could the people of the world not know why they were so enthusiastic in their scolding? As for gifting books to the world's famous scholars, and being willing to write books for the people of the world, in the eyes of others, these two were no different from hype. Only a fool would believe it. Not long after, many people were slapped in the face. The world's famous teacher, Yuan Jing, personally went to Wanzhou. He and Cheng Cheng discussed the beginner's teaching materials. The leader of the Feng family in Shangyang, Feng Run, gave tens of thousands of books to the unbuilt Golden Scale Pavilion. He also joined the development team of beginners teaching materials. Of these two people, one was the model of a famous scholar, and the other was the model of the aristocrats. They were both big shots. In ancient times, when information was backward, the effect of celebrities was unusually powerful. With Feng Run and Yuan Jing, two living advertisements, would their diehard fans not buy it? Chapter 900. The late emperor passed away, and the young emperor succeeded the throne. Dongqing valued filial piety. Naturally, they would not change the year right after they succeeded the throne. Therefore, the matter of changing the year name had been delayed from the beginning of the year to the first day of the new year. Therefore, the new year was also known as the first year of Chengzong. If it was a peaceful era, such a big event like changing the year would be a cause for celebration. However, it was different now. Dongqing was divided, the feudal lords were divided, and the reputation of the court was at rock bottom. To put it bluntly, the young emperor's edict could only be effective in the vicinity of Qinzhou. It was just a roll of yellow cloth anywhere else. As the lord, Jiang Pingji should receive the New Year's greetings from the officials in the state capital. However, the state capital of Wanzhou had not been built yet. There were still many things for her to deal with in Qinzhou and Hu County. The officials were so busy that they wanted the people to have a good new year. When the people under her rule reunited with their families, Jiang Pingji, Lu Shi, and Lu Zhao gathered for a simple dinner. Happy New Year! Jiang Pingji changed into a new set of clothes and accepted the New Year's gift from Lu Shi with a smile. Father, Happy New Year! Lu Zhao was still dressed like a rich young master. He was more particular about his clothes and accessories. Not to mention the material of his clothes, just the flower and bird fan in his hand was made of silk, and the frame of the fan was made of sandalwood. It was exquisite like a work of art. Sister, Happy New Year! Lu Zhao said his New Year's greetings and looked at Jiang Pingji eagerly. He liked elegant and rich things. His daily clothes and accessories had to be perfumed before he wore them. The daily expenses were not small. Lu Zhao's life was tight with the fixed monthly allowance given by Lu Shi. He looked forward to getting a big red envelope from Jiang Pingji during the new year. Jiang Pingji could not help but smile. She replied with her greetings, but did not take out the big red envelope that Lu Zhao had expected. Lu Zhao was speechless. He felt wronged. Did he have to continue eating dirt next month? When Lu Zhao was discouraged, Jiang Pingji said, I have sent someone to send it to your room. Lu Zhao's eyes suddenly lit up. He wanted to shout, Long live sister. Lu Shi was rather displeased. He is always chasing dogs and fighting cocks. He is ignorant and incompetent. If you continue to spoil him, he will rely on you in the future. Lu Zhao was most afraid of Lu Shi. Hearing him reprimand him, he quickly hid behind Jiang Pingji. Fortunately, Jiang Pingji was tall. Otherwise, how could she block Lu Zhao? Jiang Pingji smiled and said, So be it. It's not like I can't afford to raise him. Sister, if that's the case, can you ask father to give me a raise? Not only did Lu Zhao depend on his sister, but he also depended on his father. What made people sad and indignant was that after gnawing on him, he was still a Moonlight Clan member. It couldn't be helped. He liked to live an exquisite and luxurious life, so his daily expenses were naturally not small. Lu Shi's face twitched. If it wasn't for the fact that he didn't wear his sword during the new year, he would have drawn his sword and let Lu Zhao know why the flowers were so red. You're a man, yet you're so keen on living off a woman. Can't you have some backbone? There were only 3 people at the New Year's banquet, but this was Lu Zhao's first time celebrating the new year with so many people. In the past, in the backyard of the Lu residence, Madame Guzhen was bedridden and Madame, who did not like to see him. Even on a big day like the new year, he would stay in his courtyard and eat the dinner prepared by the servants. In his eyes, there was nothing special about the new year except that there were more rations. Lu Shi glared at Lu Zhao. Come over early tomorrow to pay your respects. Lu Zhao's expression instantly collapsed. Ever since Lu Shi retreated behind the scenes and handed over all the government affairs to Jiang Pingji, his life had been completely idle. At first, he was not used to it, but after a long time he felt happy. Every day, he would fish, walk the dog, play with the birds, visit friends, read and paint. He was happy, but Lu Zhao was completely gloomy. Once the old man was idle, he always liked to find things for himself to do. Lu Zhao's life became more and more difficult. Every day, he was asked to do his homework. Due to his authority, he obeyed for a while. After a long time, he could not stand it anymore. He simply ran to Jiang Pingji's place to seek refuge. His biological sister was indeed his biological sister. Not only did she not protect him, but she also tied him up and sent him back to Lu Shi to receive education and love. Hearing Lu Shi ask him to pay his respects early tomorrow, Lu Zhao's scalp went numb. "Sister, save me." Lu Zhao lowered his voice and shook Jiang Pingji's sleeves. His eyes sent out a signal for help. Amidst the howls of the audience in the streaming room, "So cute. Let auntie rub you." And "Streamer, you lack a sister-in-law." Jiang Pingji unceremoniously sold Lu Zhao out. She dodged sideways and heartlessly abandoned Lu Zhao, who had sent out the signal for help, leaving him to Lu Shi to deal with. On the 7th day of the new year, the market reopened. Xiangyang District was Jiang Pingji's original foundation. Under her painstaking management, it had been expanded again and again. Not only had the city walls been expanded, but the surrounding villages had also been included in the outer city and reorganized. Xiangyang District was now one of the most prosperous areas in the north. After the new year, the number of people on the streets increased sharply. Apart from the locals, there were also many figures of outsiders. These outsiders were all Dongqing students who came because of its reputation. Some were from aristocratic families, while others were from poor families. In their usual impression, Xiangyang District should be a remote and backward small town. After experiencing the double suppression of the Tsingyi army and the Red Lotus group, it should be desolate and cold. Beyond their expectations, ever since they entered Wanzhou, the scenery they saw made them suspicious. Suspicious of what? They were suspicious of what year it was now. It was clearly a chaotic time, but in Wanzhou, it was a scene of prosperity. There were wars everywhere in Dongqing, and there were constant conflicts between the feudal vassals. Outside Wanzhou, they could see refugees dressed in rags. Once they crossed the border, they could see well-proportioned fields and straw in the middle of the fields. Occasionally, they could see hard-working commoners and urchins. After entering the city, they couldn't believe their eyes. The streets were neatly planned, the eaves were arranged neatly, the houses on the left and right were exquisite and elegant. The vendors on the street were all in high spirits, their faces glowing. Not only were they in good spirits, but the clothes they wore were also very clean. There were few patches on them. Happy New Year! In the streets and alleys, joyous celebrations could be heard everywhere. Happy New Year! A little girl in a red coat stood by the side of the road. She raised her head and looked at the vendor, who was carrying the goods in a daze. The vendor didn't hear her at first, but the little girl shouted again seriously. After a while, she gulped down a mouthful of saliva. The peddler finally noticed the little girl, and when he saw her delicate face, his expression became even gentler. Seeing that the little girl was staring at the honey hawthorn fruits he had made, he smiled and took one for her. Happy New Year! Take it and eat it. Just by looking at the child's attire, he knew that he was from a wealthy family. Thank you. The little girl grinned and took the New Year's gift from the vendor. Before she could put it into her mouth, a weak-looking boy appeared beside her. The boy looked only 6 or 7 years old. He was thin, but his expression was very mature. The corners of his lips were tightly pursed. Uncle, you have to do business too. You can't take advantage of others. He raised one hand and took the little girl's hand. With his other hand, he took out a few coins from the money bag at his waist and gave it to the vendor. After saying that, he led the little girl away. The peddler took the money. Seeing the boy's attire and the book basket on his shoulder, he exclaimed in hindsight. Chapter 901. The outsider heard it and asked in surprise, "What Golden Scale Academy?" The peddler straightened his chest and said proudly, "It's an academy built by our prefecture magistrate." The outsider was also a scholar from a poor family who came because of its reputation. He had noticed the little girl in the red coat early on. After all, dyeing techniques were very low nowadays. The brighter the color, the more expensive it was. Those who could afford to wear such a bright red coat must be rich and extraordinary. Seeing that there was no servant by the girl's side, His sense of justice was triggered. He was afraid that someone would kidnap the child, so he stopped for a while. The person asked the peddler doubtfully, "When did the prefecture magistrate of Lu build an academy? Didn't he just build Golden Scale Pavilion?" "It was built a month ago. It's a place for children to study." It turned out to be a private school to teach children. Little did they know that it was not an ordinary private school. The reason for the establishment of Golden Scale Academy could be traced back to a few months ago. Yuan Jing, Cheng Cheng, Feng Run, and two other highly respected scholars formed the initial teaching material compilation team. However, the teaching materials they compiled were too obscure for adults, let alone for children to learn. Jiang Pingji directly rejected their first version of the plan. She mentioned it unintentionally, prompting them to have the idea of opening an academy for children. They were knowledgeable, so they naturally felt that the beginner's teaching material was extremely shallow. However, children without any foundation would not understand. If they could not let the children understand, wouldn't their beginner's teaching material be useless? After careful consideration, they wanted to find a group of young children and test the beginner's teaching material on them. To put it bluntly, they would be lab rats. Jiang Pingji was happy to see it happen. She waved her hand and allocated land for them. She connected the original residences and turned them into an academy. She was too lazy to think of the name of the academy, so she directly used the name Golden Scale Pavilion. As for the source of students, Jiang Pingji was not worried. She directly selected children of suitable age from the orphans of the fallen soldiers. There were not only boys but also girls. This decision caused a few scholars to object, but Jiang Pingji shut their mouths with righteousness. She said, "They are all orphans of heroes. What's the difference in their identities? Some of the soldiers died young and had only one daughter. Their fathers fought for me. How can I treat their descendants differently because of their gender? Wouldn't it disappoint people if this got out?" Now that he said it, it seemed to make sense. After several rounds of careful selection, the first batch of students of the Golden Scale Academy had been selected. Their average age ranged from 5 to 7 years old. There were 100 boys and 100 girls. When Feng Zhen heard about this, he hurriedly made a scene with Jiang Pingji and stuffed his son inside. He was far away in Chongzhou and wouldn't be able to return to Wanzhou for the next few years. He couldn't keep letting his son study by himself, could he? If he had companions of the same age to study with him, perhaps it would make him more lively? Moreover, the first batch of lab rats. The first batch of students would definitely be taught by highly respected old scholars, such as Yuan Jing. As it turned out, Feng Zhen was right. The teacher really did have the mirror of the deep abyss. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to give them some advice. The children should be divided into classes according to their age and learning progress. Previously, they had already mentioned the division of subjects. Now that they were going to be divided into classes and grades, it was not difficult for Yuan Jing and the others to accept it. In fact, dividing the students into classes was more efficient and targeted than letting all the students study together. After all that, Jiang Pingji suggested to make uniform clothing for the children. Master Yuanjing was speechless. Why didn't he realize that this student was so good at making trouble? When he asked for the reason, she answered, "It's neat and uniform. It's comfortable to look at." It was a very good and powerful reason. Master Yuanjing wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, he let Jiang Pingji do it. Anyway, she was the one paying for the expenses. What was he worried about? Jiang Pingji let Su Ke and Feng Jin be in charge of the school uniforms. She found a tailor to measure each student's figure. What's missing? What's missing? All right, the school badge. Jiang Pingji was inspired. She designed the boys' and girls' uniforms. She even drew 5 flowers made of scales. Looking at the ready-made clothes made by the embroidery mother, Su Ke almost couldn't control the primitive power in his body. What was the experience of having a squandering lord? One could tell by looking at his current state. His lord wasn't spending money. She was throwing it away. The school uniform and the identity badge were equivalent to 2 months' worth of food for an ordinary family of 4. However, in all fairness, the school uniform that his lord mentioned was quite nice. The school uniform was blue and white. The collar was embroidered with an exquisite and elegant school badge. Every student was also given an identity badge. The basic information of the students was engraved on the front of the badge. On the north side was the school badge designed by Jiang Pingji. The bottom was engraved with cloud patterns. After choosing a good day, 200 students worshipped the portrait of their master and officially enrolled in the school. They learned literature in the morning and martial arts in the afternoon. Therefore, he still sought additional homework from the teacher during his spare time. Fengyi, I love learning. Learning makes me happy. Chapter 902. More and more outsiders poured into Xiangyang district. The already bustling city became livelier. After the new year, the weather became brighter and warmer. At the ends of the streets, one could see travel-worn scholars everywhere. Similar discussions could be heard everywhere in the taverns, tea houses, and eateries. I heard that the Jinlin Pavilion will open tomorrow? That's what the notice outside the district headquarters said. I wonder what the interior of the Jinlin Pavilion looks like. Is it the same inside and out? Or is it just a facade? The magistrate of Liuzhou built Wanzhou so well. She wouldn't simply boast, would she? Let's go take a look when the pavilion opens tomorrow. Some people talked about the Jinlin Pavilion. Some talked about the current situation in the world. And some talked about Jiang Pingji. She governed Wanzhou until it was prosperous, and no one could blame her. However, the things she had done all these years were both praised and criticized by the outside world. There were only 2 points that were mentioned most often: supporting the poor and harboring disloyalty. Needless to say, among the civil and military officials under her, apart from Feng Jin, who else was from a respectable and noble family? As for harboring disloyalty, it was enough to explain everything just by looking at the recruitment notice and the construction of the Jinlin Pavilion. Under everyone's anticipation, the Jinlin Pavilion officially opened on the 3rd of March, the Flower Festival. From its appearance, the Jinlin Pavilion was no different from ordinary mansions. It inherited the consistent architectural style of Xiangyang district, simple and elegant. There were soldiers standing guard everywhere outside. Each of them had a cold glint in their eyes and a resolute look on their faces. They stood there motionlessly. Yuan Jing, Feng Run, and Cheng Cheng presided over the opening ceremony. After offering sacrifices to the gods, they personally pulled down the red silk covering the signboard. On the signboard, there were 3 big characters: Golden Scale Pavilion. The 3 characters were vigorous and powerful, with a hint of nobility. The scholars waiting outside were blocked by the soldiers with their bodies. The whole place was silent. Countless pairs of eyes stared at the hands of Yuan Jing and the others. After the ceremony, the pavilion opens. Cheng Cheng and the others wore high hats and wide belts. Their sleeves fluttered, and their expressions were solemn. With a squeak, the door of the Jinlin Pavilion opened. At that moment, several rows of soldiers passed through the crowd and arranged for the scholars to enter in an orderly manner. "Why can he enter but I can't?" The soldier in charge of inspection said. "You can't enter today without a token." "Token? What token?" The scholar who was stopped frowned fiercely. It seemed that he would not give up until he made it clear. The soldier said, "A few days ago, the district headquarters put up a notice. Anyone who wants to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion has to register and take an examination first. Only after passing can they get a token." Nowadays, paper was still very expensive, and books were even more difficult to find. It was hard to guarantee that he wouldn't run into a book thief with bad character. Su Ku and the others slightly adjusted the threshold to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion. The assessment of literary talent was secondary. The most important thing was to take the opportunity to register the other party's information and put invisible shackles on them. You dare to cause trouble? Every wrong has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. I can always find you by following the vines to the melon. When the scholar heard this, he became angry. An ordinary citizen dared to point fingers at him. Just as he was about to explode, the youth waiting behind him said, "You'd better go and register. It's the same if you come back tomorrow. Don't stand here and waste other people's time." After saying that, the young man walked in front of him and handed over his token. After verifying the authenticity of the name and token, The soldier readily let him in. This. The scholar from before hurriedly flung his sleeves and angrily went to the side to register. On the other side, the scholars who had already entered let out exclamations of surprise. When they realized that they had lost their composure, they looked at the other people around them, who were also stunned. They instantly felt better. They couldn't be blamed for being inexperienced. The scene inside the Golden Scale Pavilion was really beyond their expectations. Although it was called the Golden Scale Pavilion, there were more than one building and one pavilion inside. Currently, only the main building of the Golden Scale Pavilion was open to the public, which was also the largest building in the Golden Scale Pavilion. Looking at the name on the signboard, the crowd felt strange. But when they read the meaning carefully, they could feel the heroic spirit that hit them in the face. It couldn't be more appropriate to give the main building of the Golden Scale Pavilion such a name. The main building was in the shape of a huge ring, and the area it occupied was actually larger than that of an ordinary two-section house. There were 4 large doors, 8 small doors, and 36 wooden windows with hollow patterns. When the door was opened, the interior was brightly lit. Rows of bookshelves surrounded the building in a ring. Many of the bookshelves were already filled with paper books. There was a sign on each bookshelf, which briefly described the type of books on the bookshelf. The interior of the building was ingenious. The bookshelves themselves were divided into private rooms of various sizes. In the private rooms, there were mats for people to rest on. Apart from that, there was also a writing table and a set of brush and ink. What was even more amazing was the design of the dome on the second floor. It made full use of natural light. Even if there was no oil lamp in the room, as long as there was sufficient light outside, the room wouldn't feel dark when the windows on the second floor were opened. This is. The scholars who were qualified to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion approached one after another. Some of them were even so excited that they forgot to speak. The Golden Scale Pavilion. The well-deserved Golden Scale Pavilion. The crowd calmed down. Someone was about to step forward to take a book from the bookshelf, but was unexpectedly stopped by someone. Before that person could speak, the person explained, "Although the books in the Golden Scale Pavilion are free to read, you can't touch them casually. If you want to read any book, just ask someone to bring it to you. If you want to borrow books and copy them, bring your token over there to register. We will provide brush and ink at a low price." The Golden Scale Pavilion had just opened. They didn't want anyone to maliciously destroy books or hide them. Therefore, they had to set up a strict system at the beginning. When the public got used to it, the Golden Scale Pavilion could appropriately relax the borrowing system. When the crowd heard this, they were a little unhappy at first. But considering the price of paper books, it was reasonable for the Golden Scale Pavilion to be stricter. "There are so many books here," the manager said with a smile. "There are still 90% of books that are still in the bookstore and haven't been put on the shelves. There are still 90%. The others were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Of course, there are still 60% of the bookshelves on the first floor that are empty. The second floor is completely empty." The crowd was so shocked that they were numb. One after another, they borrowed the books that they liked and found a well-lit place to read quietly. Rather than reading, it was more like they were stroking the pages with their fingers, as if they were caressing the skin of their loved ones. The touch was too good. They were even more shocked than when Suko saw the bamboo paper for the first time. The first batch of people who entered the Golden Scale Pavilion consisted of about 100 people. Almost all of them were book lovers. They treated the thread-bound books in their hands as if they were their ancestors. Not to mention destroying them, they didn't even dare to use a little bit of force. Seeing this, the manager of the Golden Scale Pavilion heaved a sigh of relief. Not long after, someone made a request to make a copy. That person looked nervous. He was afraid that his request would be rejected. It was good enough to let people read the books for free. Why would they let others make a copy? For most people, books weren't books. Chapter 903. The popularity of the Golden Scale Pavilion continued to ferment. It was like a shy and delicate flower, emitting a rich and alluring fragrance that constantly attracted its prey to come one after another. The other feudal lords could only watch the heat. Jiang Pingji lived in Chongzhou, but she knew the situation in Wanzhou like the back of her hand. The fish in the pond have been kept for a long time. The fish are fat now. It's a good time to fish. She looked at the official documents sent by Su Ku and the others. Coincidentally, Qiguan Rang came in with a pile of bamboo slips. She hurriedly said, "Wenjeng, come over and help me draft a document." Qiguan Rang saw the smile on her face and could not help but ask, "Has something good happened, my lord?" Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Of course it's something good. If it's done, I'll make up for the 3 years of vacation that I owe you." Qiguan Rang had worked for Jiang Pingji for more than 2 years. He had experienced 3 new years, but he had never taken a vacation. Although the salary was not low, it still could not make up for the bitterness of being busy from the beginning to the end of the year. His lord's credibility had fallen to the bottom. Unless Qiguan Rang was stupid, he would not believe a word about the vacation. He did not believe it, but he said, "All right, I'll grind the ink now." Jiang Pingji said, "Xiaoyu and Huayu told me that as of now, there are 3,963 scholars who have borrowed books from the Golden Scale Pavilion." When Qiguan Rang heard the number, he almost dropped the pen in his hand. There are 3,963 people? To enter the Golden Scale Pavilion, one had to go through a simple assessment. Only those who passed the assessment had the right to register their name and make a token. As long as they checked the number of tokens, they could know how many people had entered the Golden Scale Pavilion. Jiang Pingji also used this method to collect basic information about the scholars. Entering and exiting the Golden Scale Pavilion, borrowing books and copying books had to be registered. Therefore, she could know how long each person had read, which books they had read, and which books they had copied. Based on the information, she could also roughly judge whether the person was eager to learn, whether they had perseverance, and how good their foundation was. Unknowingly, most of the information about these people had been leaked. Among these people, there is no lack of talented people. I plan to recruit targeted people. Although we are also cultivating our own talents, it will still take a few years. We can't always let one of you do the work of 10 people. If you become exhausted, I will feel distressed. The so-called conscription was actually a system to promote talents. As the governor of the prefecture, Jiang Pingji naturally had the right to do so. After Qiguan Rang heard this, he snorted softly and did not comment. If his lord took pity on them, why would she owe him 3 years of leave in a row? 3 years, 7 days of annual leave a year, a total of 21 days. They were all swallowed by his lord. Does my lord mean that you want to promote talents from among these scholars? Jiang Pingji said, "Of course. They've already sent themselves to me. How can I let them go so easily? I painstakingly built the Golden Scale Pavilion for them to study and learn for free. Could it be that I'm doing all this for someone else, so that they can rely on the other party after they grow up? We will first select those with good character and talent, to alleviate the predicament of the shortage of manpower. As for the rest, you can come and go as you please." The corner of Qiguan Rang's mouth twitched. He had really underestimated his lord. She was really a good businessman. Her ability to pluck feathers from wild geese was amazing. If it was someone else, they might not have had such a good reaction like her. Not only could she draw inferences about other cases from one instance, but she could also exploit them over and over again. "My lord, I'm afraid it's difficult to distinguish who's better and who's worse based on this information alone." Jiang Pingji said with a smile, "This is simple. Why don't we use the banner of making friends through literature and set a few difficult questions to test everyone every day? Then let the prestigious scholars be the judges. They'll score everyone's answers and list out who's better and who's better. Every day, the top 3 will receive meal vouchers from the guest house. With the voucher, they can eat 3 meals a day at the guest house. Each meal will provide 2 meat dishes, 2 vegetables, and 1 soup for free. In this way, they could not only get a clear understanding of everyone's talents and knowledge, but they could also build a reputation for the guest house in Wanzhou." Qiguan Rang sighed as he wrote quickly. His lord was a profiteer who was held back by her ambition to dominate the world. Not long after, Qiguan Rang finished writing a document and handed it to Jiang Pingji to read. If there were no problems with the content, This document could be sent to Wanzhou urgently. By the way, remember to get the messenger to look for Zhengtu and ask him if he wants to bring anything along. Why should I look for General Fu Wang? Qiguan Rang was surprised. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips and muttered, looking at the time, Hui Jun will be giving birth soon. Qiguan Rang understood immediately. If one did not live in this era where books were scarce, one would never understand people's thirst for knowledge. There were always students who waited outside the Jinlin pavilion before dawn. They only left reluctantly when the pavilion closed. Sometimes, they did not even have time to tidy up their appearances. They studied hard day and night, diligently practicing without stopping. In order not to kill anyone, Suk especially arranged for people to set up a free canteen in the Jinlin pavilion. Everyone could receive a bowl of thick meat porridge with their identity token. They even opened up a few quiet courtyards for the scholars to take a break or discuss scriptures in their spare time. In just 3 months, the name of the Jinlin pavilion in Wanzhou had spread throughout the whole of Dongqing. It even had the tendency to spread to other countries. On this day, the scholars stayed in the Jinlin pavilion as usual. Some frowned in deep thought, some discussed with their friends in low voices, and some copied seriously. At this moment, a notice quietly appeared in the Jinlin pavilion. What's this? A commoner dressed in linen felt his stomach was empty. He carefully got up from his seat and was about to receive a bowl of meat porridge to fill his stomach when he happened to see the notice board outside the door. He fixed his eyes on it and revealed some confusion on his face. Guest house? What is this place? It was obvious that it was something created by merchants. It was full of the stench of money. The passing scholars frowned unhappily. The commoner said, "This guest house is a restaurant established by the magistrate of Liuzhou. The profits of the restaurant are used to settle down the orphans of the soldiers." Hearing that it was a restaurant established by Jiang Pingji, the scholar's expression softened a little. If it was used in the right way, he could reluctantly tolerate merchants doing business in the Jinlin pavilion. He also went forward to read the contents of the notice board carefully. He suddenly became interested. It was not that most of the scholars could not afford to eat. At the very least, the Jinlin pavilion provided meat porridge for free. One bowl was enough to fill one's stomach. What they cared about was ranking and winning. If they answered well, they would gain the favor of the scholars, and their social status would immediately rise to a higher level. Hearing the news, many interested scholars hurriedly brought their brushes, ink and bamboo slips over to copy the questions. It was only the first day, but there were as many as 100 people who participated in answering the questions. Chapter 904. Of course, the so-called guidance was not teaching them face-to-face, but adding a few comments on the bamboo slips they submitted. Even so, when the first 3 scholars saw the name of the reviewer on the bamboo slips, they were so excited that they could not speak. The reviewer was none other than the famous teacher, Master Yuanjing. In layman's terms, not only did they get their idol's autograph, but they also got their idol's guidance. They were so happy that they almost fainted. One should not think that idol chasing only existed in modern times. The ancient people were just as enthusiastic about idol chasing. Throwing fruits into a cart was a small matter. There were even brainless fans, who wrote poems to express their love for idol chasing every few days. Speaking of brainless fans, Master Yuanjing had many brainless fans. A ready-made example was Tang Yao. He was Master Yuanjing's brainless fan. With his admiration for Master Yuanjing, he resolutely left his family and traveled thousands of miles to Langyi County to study. After the news spread, the number of people who submitted bamboo slips soared to thousands on the second day. Master Yuanjing was speechless. The old man had to correct and read thousands of bamboo slips in one night. Therefore, for the sake of their lives, the exam that was supposed to be done once a day became once every 7 days. Cheng Cheng saw Master Yuanjing's pale face and took the initiative to help him review. If he was lucky, he could discover young people with potential. It turned out that Jiang Pingji's method was very effective. Don't look at how there were only 10 questions each time, but each question hit a very targeted probe. Most of the scholars did not realize that there was something fishy about it. Only a few people who were more sensitive noticed it. Faintly, They felt that it was related to their future, so they paid more attention to the questions. Every time, they deliberated over the questions repeatedly before writing. They did not give a general answer. Instead, they chose to explore deeply, speak freely, and express their opinions directly. In fact, most of the people's literary talent could not catch Master Yuanjing's attention, but he could occasionally find one or two outstanding works that made his eyes light up. After a few corrections, Master Yuanjing smiled helplessly. There are many moldable talents among them. There is an 80% chance that they will be recruited by the magistrate of Liuzhou. From the contents of the previous answers, many people had realized the hidden meaning behind the 10 questions. At first, they were perfunctory. Later on, they were very attentive. Even a fool could see the motivation behind this change. Jiang Pingji was not very attractive to the scholars who came from aristocratic families. What about those scholars from poor families? Once they were fortunate enough to receive Jiang Pingji's conquests, it was tantamount to reaching the sky in a single bound. The road to success was directly paved under their feet. Cheng Qing thought for a moment and said, although the Lu Prefecture's overseer is powerful, there aren't many people who can be used. Naturally, he has to recruit talents. This kind of assessment method was truly unheard of and unseen. Compared to this, I'm worried about something else. When Yuan Jing heard that, he immediately understood what Cheng Qing was worried about. Conscription was a way to promote talents. However, this was not a one-way way. It was a two-way street, and did not have any coercive power. Conquests were also a form of courtesy. The conquered could gladly accept the offer, but he could also decline it. Jiang Pingji had the right to conquer someone in her territory, and that person also had the right to reject her. If they didn't accept the conquests, some people did it because they really did not want to be an official. They wanted to live in seclusion and live a carefree life. Some people wanted to gain reputation. For example, if a beautiful girl from a poor family rejected the love of a domineering CEO, the beautiful girl would instantly become famous. Of course, there was a third situation, which was to keep people in suspense. In layman's terms, some people felt that the easier it was to get, the less it would be treasured. Therefore, they would decline it again and again. When the other party's appetite was at its highest, they would gladly accept the conquests, and it would become a good story between the ruler and the minister. Conscription not accepting was an unspoken rule in the industry. Generally, people would refuse the first time, and only agree to be an official after the second or third time. Cheng Qing was a little worried. Would the seedlings he favored lose their minds and play conscription in front of Jiang Pingji? Based on his understanding of the governor, he was proud. If she was rejected once, she would not do it a second time. Those who wanted to keep people in suspense would go overboard. Master Yuan Jing and Cheng Qing looked at each other tacitly. They suddenly felt an indescribable sense of melancholy. They felt that there would definitely be people who would not accept the conscription. As expected, there were people who did it. There was more than one person. After several attempts, the talent assessment was almost done. Su Ke followed Jiang Pingji's wishes and extended an olive branch to the 28 young people. Among the 28 people, 10 were born poor, 11 were from destitute gentry families, and the other 7 were from gentry families with average family backgrounds. They were all between 20 and 40 years old. They were in their golden years and had a lot of room for nurturing. In the end, among the 28 people, 20 accepted the conscription, and the rest all rejected. Su Ke was speechless. There are other candidates anyway. Chapter 905. There was only one chance. If he didn't grasp it, how could he blame others for not giving him a second chance? How could that be? Feng Jin smiled and comforted Su Ke, in case his colleague was angered to the point of causing trouble. It wasn't that Su Ke didn't understand this, but he was still a little indignant. After a while he said, "No matter what, we still have to consult the Lord about this and see what she decides." Feng Jin said, "Of course." Even though they understood Jiang Pingji's temper and knew that she wouldn't go for a second conscription, they couldn't make decisions for her. As expected, Jiang Pingji, who was far away in Chengzhou, received the news. She was so angry that she wanted to laugh. The conscription was rejected? Since they don't think highly of me, I won't force them. Wenjung, draft a document and tell Xiaoyu what to do. Everything will be done according to the rules. Although 20 people agreed, we still don't have enough manpower. Let him continue to filter. Qiguanrang cupped his hands in acknowledgement. No matter what reason they had for rejecting the conscription, Jiang Pingji would grant them their wish. There was only one chance, and it was always given to those who were prepared, who would stretch out their face to be slapped a second time after being slapped in the face once. She didn't want her dignity. In the words of the livestream viewers, one had to have the capital to be pretentious. If he wasn't Zhuge Liang, why would he bother with 3 visits to the thatched cottage? Xu Shenyali, streamer, don't be angry. Pat your head. Luoyu treading on flowers. It's their loss to lose the chance. Without these people, there are still millions of talents waiting for the streamer. Xiao Xiao. In modern times, the streamer is like the CEO of a company. They are freshmen who applied for a job. The company has already decided to hire them, but the freshmen arrogantly rejected them. At this point, they still expect the company's CEO to personally invite them? Do they really think they're Zhuge Liang? Pia Wiang. I realize that your focus is a little off. Isn't the focus on the streamer's method of promoting talents? The bullet screen was quickly drowned out by the sea of bullet screens. Qiguanrang, who was at the side, stole a glance at Fengzhen. He noticed that the latter was smiling with his eyes squinted, as if he was watching a good show from the sidelines. At noon, Qiguanrang and Fengzhen went out together. He lowered his voice and asked, Zisher, what were you laughing at just now? Fengzhen held a bag of dried and pickled radishes in his hands. He ate them as he walked. He had stolen them from the Chongzhou guest house branch. It was salty with a hint of spiciness, and could be used as a snack to grind the teeth. Fortunately, Qiguanrang wasn't Fengzhen. Otherwise, how could he stand the sight of Fengzhen chewing on dried carrots as he walked? She would definitely reprimand him for his lack of manners. Fengzhen laughed and said, If I don't laugh, am I supposed to go forward and advise my lord to be magnanimous? Of course not. Qiguanrang furrowed his brows and said, Those 8 people. What a pity. It was an unspoken rule in the industry to refuse a conquest. As long as the person wasn't uninterested in fame, or looked down on others, they would usually agree to a second conquest. Fengzhen said, Don't you know the Lord's temperament? She was very clear in her heart, but she was unwilling to put down her pride and go on a second expedition. Without these 8 people, there would always be others to fill in. If the person who failed was a peerless genius who could conquer the world, he would have the resources to do so, but he was not. It's already good enough that my lord didn't curse him in her heart, let alone go on a second expedition. Qiguanrang let out a long sigh. How could he not know this? I'm afraid that my lord will be criticized and scolded for being narrow-minded. Can you tolerate such words? What he was afraid of was taking advantage of the situation, and directly using his lord's gender as an excuse, saying that a woman was a woman, short-sighted and narrow-minded. Other people could be magnanimous enough to go on a second expedition. But why was she so unreasonable when it came to her? Putting on airs after being rejected once? She was so unforgiving and unworthy. Didn't she know that talented people were precious and needed to be accommodated? Fengzhen laughed and said, Of course I can't tolerate it, but forcing my lord to bend over and do something she doesn't want to do is even more intolerable. Qiguanrang glanced at Fengzhen. From his words, it was as if he couldn't bear to see his lord suffer. He raised his hand and snatched the dried carrots from Fengzhen's hand. Let's see what else this guy could eat. Fengzhen cried out in sorrow. Let's talk things out. Don't steal my snacks. When the news reached Wanzhou, Su Ku and the others already knew what to do. The first batch of people who agreed to go on the expedition had long been thrown to their posts to hone themselves. He, Fengzhen, and the others still had to keep an eye on them at all times to prevent any mistakes. The few of them were still steady and honest, and now they were on the right track. With these people, Su Ku clearly felt his workload lighten. Finally, he didn't have to go home day and night. After receiving Jiang Pingji's reply, Su Ku immediately started on the second expedition. This time, He focused on selecting talents in agriculture and water conservancy. Even when the second batch of names was out, the first batch of people who failed to go on the expedition were still anxiously waiting for news. After waiting for a long time, there was still no news. Finally, someone couldn't sit still. This person had used a lot of connections to find out the news. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning. My lord said that a melon that is forcefully picked won't be sweet. Since you have other plans, I wish you success in your career. The person was so angry that his face turned pale. He was ashamed, angry, and embarrassed. Finally, he snorted coldly and angrily flicked his sleeves. A woman is a woman after all. She is shallow and narrow-minded. What kind of future can someone who seeks revenge for the smallest grievance have? Even if we don't talk about being courteous, we should at least have tolerance and magnanimity. Now that I've seen her, she really isn't worth it to rely on. A real man has aspirations. How can he succumb to a woman whose eyelids are as small as beans? It's painful and pitiful. Out of the 8 people who failed to go on the expedition, only 2 chose to remain silent. The other 6 couldn't bear the injustice. They didn't shout abuse, but when they talked about the world's situation with their friends, they would always criticize Jiang Pingji. Once their friends spoke up for Jiang Pingji, they would always be refuted. This woman's eyes are as small as beans. If she didn't rely on the reputation of her father Lu Shi, how could she have the foundation she has today? She's just a woman. Does she really think she can overturn the universe and reverse yin and yang? Don't be fooled by her limitless glory now. In fact, there are many hidden dangers. So what if she controls Chongzhou, Wanzhou, and Hu County? The northern borderline is eyeing her covetously in the north, and the fake emperor is preparing for war in the south. Let's wait and see how long this ignorant woman can be arrogant. Most of the literati cared about their reputation. Even if they didn't say anything, they wouldn't scold her for getting free food, drinks, and books. These people were particularly unconventional and stood out from the crowd. The establishment of the Jinling Pavilion in Wanzhou attracted many scholars to flock there. These people stimulated the domestic demand of the economy. Not only did they make Wanzhou's economy flourish, but they also made Wanzhou's literary style flourish. Many like-minded scholars gathered together. They either discussed poetry, gave advice on the country, or recited poems and paintings. The literary atmosphere was strong. The literary gathering was open to the public. Naturally, the words and deeds of these people spread to the ears of Su Ku and the others. Bastards, such despicable people, they're simply. Su Ku was so angry that he slammed the table. It was almost the end of the month. He had to handle more and more things. He slept less and was in a bad mood. Now that he heard slander, he almost exploded with anger. Cheng Yuan passed by the door with a stack of bamboo slips in his arms. He heard the commotion inside and let out a long sigh. Su Ku's temper had always been good. Who had the ability to make him so irritable? Chapter 906. Jiang Pingji had always treated the civil and military officials under her as little dukes. But how could they not treat their lord as a daughter and accommodate her? Su Ku was so angry that her menopause was acting up prematurely. The vile person in her heart had already turned into a shrew. She wanted nothing more than to roll up her sleeves and kill those people. If he didn't give them a few slaps, he wouldn't know why the flowers were so red. Did they really think that Wanzhou was a charity? Did he really think that they were the stupidest idiots in the world? Did he really think that he could borrow, copy, and read the rich books of the Golden Scale Pavilion without any scruples? Motherf ***, eat their food, use their food, live in their house, read their books, and in the end put down her bowl and chopsticks and scold them? Which emperor gave him the right to do so? Seeing that the black aura surrounding Su Ku was getting thicker and thicker, as if he had hit a bottleneck, Wanzhou's chief steward Su Ku finally flipped out. Gong Liao, come in. When Cheng Yuan, who happened to pass by, heard this, his scalp went numb. He had an ominous premonition. Even though Su Ku had been in charge of internal affairs all these years, and was practically rooted in Xiangyang district, rarely going out for official business, Cheng Yuan did not dare to look down on him. Official Registrar Su, what can I do for you? Su Ku said with a gloomy face. There's something I want you to do. Ruining his mistress's reputation in Wanzhou was no longer just taking advantage of her. If this matter reaches the ears of the Lord, she will definitely reprimand us for not governing properly. It was fine if she was reprimanded, but she was afraid that the world would misunderstand that the Lord was not strict in her governance, that she was timid, and that anyone could humiliate her. Gong Liao, do you understand? Cheng Yuan said, I understand. In layman's terms, anyone who bullied their lord would be crushed to death. Su Ke's expression softened a little as he said to Cheng Yuan, Gong Liao, come closer and talk. Cheng Yuan obediently stepped forward and sat down beside Su Ke's desk. The two of them whispered to each other. When Cheng Yuan heard this, his expression changed from solemnity to surprise, and finally to pity. Originally, he was filled with righteous indignation at those people who had failed in the conquest, but now, he felt some sympathy for them. Of all the people he could have offended, why did he have to offend these unreasonable people from Wanzhou? His father was right. Wanzhou was a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Su Ke was indeed of humble birth, but when it came to managing internal affairs, he ranked in the top 3 in the entire Wanzhou group. In the whole of Dongqing, he was probably in the top 5. Not only was this person in charge of internal affairs, but he was also deeply trusted by the Lord. Chapter 907. When it came to scumbags, they thought of Chen Shimi. They thought of how he abandoned his wife and son in order to curry favor with the rich and powerful. He could be said to be the representative of scumbags since ancient times. How many people knew that not only did Chen Shimi not abandon his wife and son, but he was also an honest, upright, and outspoken official? This was the power of scholars. With a pen, they could poke a person on the pillar of shame in history and be spurned by people for generations to come. As for the truth, haha, haven't you heard of this saying? Open your mouth to start a rumor, but run your legs to refute it? The people loved melodramatic gossip and preferred stories with ups and downs. As for the truth, few people cared. That Lu Shi is really a shrew. Does she want to shed all pretense of cordiality and hold it against us? She's a woman. How can she not hold a grudge? Someone snorted disdainfully, but there was a flash of guilt in his eyes. However, this trace of guilt was quickly buried. Jinlin Pavilion was open to the public for free. They had also obtained the right to enter the pavilion. Of course, they were qualified to enjoy all the benefits inside. They did not owe Wanzhou anything, whether it was borrowing books, copying books, or other benefits. They were all voluntarily provided by Wanzhou. Since it was voluntary, they could not be considered to have received Wanzhou's favor. In this way, how could it be considered to be returning good for evil? Did Wanzhou still want to act like a hooligan and demand repayment? They verbally despised Jiang Pingji's gender, but they were not too stupid. After all, Jiang Pingji had power and influence, but they did not. When they saw the topic on the notice board, they panicked for a while, then immediately comforted themselves. 2 days passed and nothing happened. As expected, it's just a bluff. They had been quiet for 2 days, but now they jumped out again. Not only did they slander Jiang Pingji, but they even criticized Jinlin Pavilion. No matter how they became famous, at least their reputation was better than many unknown people. Black and red were still red. However, the atmosphere was not right. Soon they could not laugh anymore. The scholars who had been chatting with them were all gone. Every time they approached them to discuss something, they would always be rejected with all sorts of reasons. When many familiar faces saw their faces, they covered their noses with their sleeves and quickly walked around them. Occasionally, they could even hear people whispering and glancing at them from time to time. Their eyes were filled with disdain. My dear brothers, in the courtyard of the poetry meet, he saw a few friends sitting on the ground in the distance. Everyone had a satisfied smile on their faces, as though they were discussing something. Coincidentally, Zhao Kuang heard that the great scholar had countless books, and went to borrow some from the great scholar. The great scholar borrowed them, and Zhao Kuang benefited greatly from the books. Using this opportunity, he received help from a noble, and was promoted all the way. After he became famous, the tree demon came to Zhao Kuang to repay his debt. However, Zhao Kuang said that the tree demon had bewitched him and burned him to death. When the great scholar heard this, he felt indignant for the tree demon. Everyone knew that the great scholar had lent books to Zhao Kuang, but Zhao Kuang said that his success was all due to his talent, and that it had nothing to do with the great scholar borrowing books. Chapter 908. After saying so much his tongue was dry, the scholar hurriedly asked, "What's next?" The storyteller cursed his bad luck. There's nothing else. The story had just reached the most fascinating part, but there was nothing else. No wonder the commoners were so angry. Nothing else. The commoner curled his lips. There was a hint of anger in his words. He raised his hand and pointed at the storyteller in the room. "Didn't you hear what that bastard old man said? The next chapter hasn't been written yet, but according to tradition, Zhao Huang, that shameless villain, will not have a good ending." The scholar was furious when he heard this. He said angrily, "You're just a commoner. Who gave you the guts to talk about a scholar? Wasn't Zhao Huang his name?" The commoner in front of him said in front of him that he would not have a good ending. How could Zhao Huang take this lying down? Zhao Huang flew into a rage without warning. The commoner was shocked. After coming back to his senses, the commoner also became angry. He said, "That's the convention. Who dares to violate the rules of this industry? Unless the writer, Xiantu Layman, doesn't want to stay in Wanzhou anymore." Wei Si's purpose in supporting novelists was to control public opinion. As the initiator, he had the right to set perfect rules for the novel industry. In addition to the previous rules, Wei Si also stipulated that the spirit of the novel must be positive. What was positive? The content of the story must not involve vulgar filth, and the main theme must be correct. The first rule was easy to understand, but the latter was complicated. Whether it was the protagonist or the supporting role, once involved, there must be no happy ending, including but not limited to repaying kindness with enmity, abandoning one's wife and children, favoring one's concubine and killing one's wife, marrying another, not distinguishing between legitimate and concubine, being unkind to parents, being filial to children, being disrespectful to elders, and being heartless to children. According to the severity of the plot, the characters would suffer different degrees of setbacks. Zhao Huang in the story had already violated several rules. According to the rules of the industry, Zhao Huang's ending would not be good. The commoners kept up with the updates for several days. Their dislike of Zhao Huang had reached its peak. As the plot developed, the tree demon and great scholar Lu were also in danger because of Zhao Huang's framing. They were having a good time listening to the novel. Next, the wicked would get fancy retribution, but there was nothing below. The real-life version of Zhao Huang was furious. What the hell was Xiantu Layman? How dare he use his name to write such a lowly novel? It would have been fine if it was a coincidence that they shared the same name, but it was not. In the story, Zhao Kuang clearly had a family, but he still lied and said that he was not married, tricking the pure and innocent tree demon into giving him his heart. In reality, Zhao Kuang also had a family. When he heard that Wanzhou had the Golden Scale Pavilion, he yearned for it very much. He left his old parents in the care of a child bride who was already married. Along the way, he used his talent to deceive an ignorant village girl, and after a one-night stand, he ran away with her money. In the story, Zhao Huang was born into a family of bricklayers. He used his parents' hard-earned money to disguise himself as a second-generation rich kid, ignoring his crippled father and blind mother. In reality, Zhao Huang was born into a wealthy family in the countryside. His parents sold 6 of his sisters to support his education, and he pretended to be the son of a rich man in front of his friends. In the story, Zhao Kuang borrowed the great scholar's book to have the opportunity to further his studies, but in the end, he made a false accusation and wanted to kill the great scholar. In reality, Zhao Kuang enjoyed the benefits of the Golden Scale Pavilion. After failing to conquer it, he slandered and insulted the governor of Lu Province, trying to make a name for himself by stepping on him. With so many similarities, how could Zhao Kuang not care? How is this a story? It was obviously a deliberate allusion to him, and even the name was copied. The common people did not know. But how could the scholars who spent their days in the Golden Scale Pavilion not know? No wonder. No wonder these few days, some scholars who got along with him avoided him. The crux of the problem was actually this. The common people were inexplicably bombarded by Zhao Kuang. Before he could get angry, Zhao Kuang had already flung his sleeves and left. Since the governor of Lu province used such a method to deal with him, don't blame him for being heartless. Jiang Pingji was really wronged. She was so busy. How could she have the time to care about one or two small shrimps? Zhao Kuang shamelessly stayed in the Golden Scale Pavilion. In his opinion, being ostracized and treated coldly by a few scholars was nothing. It was naive and laughable that the governor of Lu province wanted to use such a method to deal with him. Did the matter end there? Of course not. Monk Xiangfeng was a pen holder in Wanzhou. He was best at writing all kinds of stories, and he was quite famous in the streets. This time he did not write one story, but 6 short stories linked together to form a series. In addition to the legend of Zhao Kuang, there were 5 other books. The male protagonist of each book was an ungrateful person. His actions were hateful and made people's teeth itch. After writing 2 short stories, the gossipy common people found the prototype of the male protagonist through clues. After understanding it in detail, they exploded in anger. Was their governor someone who could be insulted by just anyone? How could an ungrateful person have the face to stand on the land of Wanzhou? Was it reasonable to return evil for good? F***ck off. Why didn't he just soar to the sky on the monkey? Coincidentally, at this time, the people who used return evil for good? How do you repay good? The test results for this topic were out. Zhao Kuang and the others wanted to cry, but had no tears. They discovered that many scholars used their incident as an example. Their words were harsh and merciless. The situation continued to worsen. The landlord of the folk house. A small temple cannot accommodate a great Buddha. I don't want the rent for 10 days. Let's go, let's go. The waiter of the tea house. We are all serious businessmen. We only do business as human beings, not animals. Don't block the way. The manager of the restaurant. I'm sorry, sir. There's a sign in front of the door. Our land is barren and unruly, full of wicked people. 2 strong men with thick arms and wooden mallets stood at the door. 2 pairs of tiger eyes stared at them fiercely, like wild beasts looking for food. Not to mention the tea house, the wine shop, the street vendors, even the brothel, which welcomed everyone, did not entertain them. One of them was particularly unlucky. One night, he went to the brothel to seek pleasure. The next day, he woke up to find that his buttocks were in pain. There were even streaks of blood hanging from them. Not only did he fail to pluck flowers for pleasure, his chrysanthemum was stolen by some bastard. They underestimated the respect and love the people of Wanzhou had for Jiang Pingji, and the influence of public opinion. Seeing their reputation destroyed, they could only flee with their tails between their legs in the end. Although they left, their story continued to spread in Wanzhou. It was even exported to Chongzhou, Hu County and other places. 2 months later, Jiang Pingji happened to find out about it. She was almost amused by Su Ke's actions. Jiang Pingji said to Feng Zhen, Xiaoyu, you don't have to be so angry. They're just a few scholars who don't know how to appreciate favors. They insulted me. Just chase them out of the Jinling Pavilion and blacklist them forever. Why do you have to go through all this trouble? Chapter 909. Although he said he was making a mountain out of a molehill, he was very happy in his heart. Jiang Pingji said, according to what you said, none of the scholars who entered the Jinling Pavilion dared to scold me? Humans have a face and trees have a bark. Not everyone is as shameless as those people. Feng Zhen said with a sinister smile. The scholars of the world have received favors from our Lord, so it's naturally inconvenient for them to reprimand you. As long as you don't do anything that infuriates the heavens and the people, your reputation should be fine. She established the Jinling Pavilion and gave favors to the scholars in the world. As long as the scholars still had some dignity, they would not easily fall out with Jiang Pingji. Jiang Pingji pinched her chin. She felt that Feng Zhen's words made sense. Since I'm doing you a favor, I'll do it to the end. Feng Zhen was surprised. What idea did my lord come up with this time? Jiang Pingji took out a booklet from her sleeve. Feng Zhen took it and looked at it. The 4 words de Xia's rhyming book were written neatly on the cover. Feng Zhen smiled bitterly after reading it. I'm already in my 30s. Why would I still need to read De Xia Yin? Keep it for yourself, my lord. The so-called De Xia rhyme book was basically the ancient version of Pinyin, similar to the Qian and Guangyin, that the live stream viewers were familiar with. The creator of Great Xia rhyme was Prime Minister Huangfu of the previous dynasty. The phonetic transcription of the Great Xia rhyming book was divided into two types: straight phonetic and reverse cut. Straight phonetic was to use homophones to transcribe the phonetic of a word, while reverse cut was to use two commonly used words to transcribe the phonetic of a word. For example, the direct pronunciation of Kong is the transcription of Kong, and the reverse is Ku and Ong. Thanks to this book of rhymes of the Great Xia dynasty, after the Great Xia dynasty split up, the official language of the 5 countries became the same. Otherwise, there would be different dialects in the world, and it would be impossible for them to communicate properly. Children had to memorize the initial consonants and final consonants in the De Xia rhyming book for the sake of learning in the future. However, the scarier part was that there were 49 initial consonants and 181 final consonants in De Xia rhyming book. Before Meng Tong's enlightenment, he had to memorize 230 common words. In layman's terms, before teaching a person how to read, the person must have a certain level of literacy. He had to memorize 230 commonly used words in Great Xia rhyming book before he could use these words to mark the pronunciations of other words. Children's enlightenment was slow, and it was difficult for the common people to develop their wisdom. The difficulty of phonetic transcription was also a huge obstacle. Jiang Pingji said, "You'll know once you open it." Feng Zhen was suspicious. He lifted his hand and opened the book. He discovered that the title page also had the words De Xia Dynasty's rhyming book written on it. There were also strange symbols beside each word. He was puzzled and raised his head to look at Jiang Pingji's face. He realized that she was looking at him with a face full of expectation. Feng Zhenan suppressed his emotions and flipped through a few more pages. It was filled with familiar words, but there were tiny symbols around each word. He was puzzled. Could it be that the secret lied in these symbols? Feng Zhen thought about it and began to carefully search for the similarities between these symbols. Indeed, he really did find some patterns. The more he searched, the more frightened Feng Zhen became. It was rare for Longzi to put his heart and soul into something, and the audience in the live broadcast room was also writing at a great speed. Why? They all knew that Jiang Pingji came from the interstellar world of the future, but she had never spoken a word of her hometown. She didn't even write the word hometown. How could he miss out on such a rare opportunity? This was a good opportunity to study the language of the future. Jiang Pingji saw that Feng Zhen had followed suit and drawn the symbols. She smiled and squinted her eyes. She knew that he had figured out the trick. She said, "A few days ago, you told me that Feng Yi complained that Meng Tong of the Golden Scale Academy was tormented by the De Xia dynasty's rhyming book?" Feng Zhen vaguely guessed something. He secretly clenched his fists and suppressed the surging emotions in his heart. "It's true. So I went back and found a copy of the De Xia dynasty's rhyming book. After studying it carefully, I discovered a big secret." Jiang Pingji smiled and squinted her eyes. She suddenly asked an irrelevant question. "You also know about the symbols that Mr. Cheng researched, right?" Feng Zhen said, "Of course I know." Because of the symbols, the celebrities gathered in Wanzhou were in a heated argument. Everyone had their own opinions on the matter of the symbols. The scene was like charabah. Jiang Pingji said, "I was inspired by this. I was thinking, can I also use different symbols to represent different pronunciations?" In her world, there was such a thing as pinyin. The symbols used were completely different from what the audience in the live broadcast room knew. Jiang Pingji didn't use the symbols given by the audience. Instead, she chose the interstellar language that she was familiar with. The De Xia dynasty's rhyming book is indeed good, but the threshold is too high. The mechanism is also complicated. It's extremely difficult for ordinary people to get started. If we use these symbols to mark the pronunciations, it'll be much easier. Children only need to remember a few dozen symbols to be able to practice pinyin. Feng Zhen had a guess in his heart, but when he got Jiang Pingji's confirmation, he still couldn't believe his ears. The obviously complicated Xia dynasty's rhyming book could be simplified to this extent? Really, any word can be spelled out? Won't you know if you try? Feng Zhen didn't believe it. He randomly took out 2 books, picked a few dozen words, and compared them with the symbols he'd sorted out. After testing it out, it was indeed correct. He blinked his eyes in disbelief. If this simple method of phonetic transcription could be popularized on a large scale, it would save a lot of time and energy. It would also lower the threshold for people to study and give more people from poor families the hope of studying. I plan to personally go back to Wanzhou, Jiang Pingji said to Feng Zhen. Jiang Pingji said to Feng Zhen, this brand new rhyming book will be tested in the Jinlin Academy for now to see how it works. If there are no problems, I plan to popularize these phonetic symbols in my own territory. Feng Zhen spent a lot of effort to force himself to calm down. My lord, Jiang Pingji said, it's a long road to enlighten the people. The people can't read a word, but if they put their minds to it, they can memorize it in less than 3 days. When the time comes, the government will issue an order. One will be written in normal words, and the other will be marked with symbols. The people can use the phonetic symbols they've memorized to spell out the words one by one. Think about it, if that's the case, how much effort can the government save? The low literacy rate of the people indirectly affected the efficiency of the government's issuing of government orders. Because they couldn't read, they didn't know what the government had issued. Their eyes were blank, and they couldn't understand anything. If they could spell out the words themselves, they would know what was written on the notice. Even if they couldn't read the words, they could read them out. Feng Zhen felt his mouth go dry. He stared at his lord blankly. He didn't look like he was looking at his lord, but like he was looking at a god. Seeing that Feng Zhen didn't respond, Jiang Pingji threw the rhyming book of Xia and said angrily, do you agree or not? Feng Zhen was stunned. How could he not agree to such a good thing? Besides, the lord was the lord. She was the one who made the decisions. Why was she asking him? Feng Zhen said, everything is up to you, my lord. Zhen, I'm willing to be at your beck and call, even if I have to die 1,000 times. Jiang Pingji said, all right, let's agree. The affairs of Wanzhou are all in your hands. Feng Zhen heard clearly what Jiang Pingji said and broke out in a cold sweat. Huh, Jiang Pingji said, didn't I say before that I want to go back to Wanzhou? I asked you if you agreed. You said that I would make the decision. Feng Zhen looked at the government office filled with bamboo slips in a daze, then looked at his lord who was smiling brightly. My life is over. Chapter 9:10. Feng Zisher, that's your lord, not your daughter. Don't be coaxed by her sweet words and forget everything, okay? Qiguan Rang had returned from his patrol and found that his lord had disappeared without a trace. He was furious. Feng Zhen felt wrong too. How would he know that his lord was so treacherous? His lord disappeared without a trace. His heart was tired. Qiguan Rang let out a long sigh. Fortunately, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou are holding each other back and can't recover for the time being. There's no need to worry even if my lord isn't here. If Chongzhou really needed Jiang Pingji, according to his lord's personality, she wouldn't leave the mess behind and leave. Now, forget it, let her be. Other than compromise, Qiguan Rang couldn't think of a second choice. Feng Zhen sneered. Wenzheng, you're talking about me. Aren't you the same? After saying that, Feng Zhen sighed in his heart and thought. It wasn't that they were being played by their lord. It was clear that they spoiled their lord too much and deliberately let her have her way. The two of them didn't know that their lord, who said she wanted to return to Wanzhou, had taken a small detour on her way back and turned to another place. It was the height of summer, and the sun was shining brightly. Under the command of Wei Xiai and the others, the main roads in Shangjing had been completed. The buildings in the city were also planned. Zixiao, eat some watermelon. This watermelon has been soaked in a well and is very cold. Eat some to relieve the heat, so that you won't faint from the heat. Zhang Ping played the role of a nanny dutifully. He couldn't wait to serve Wei Xiai, the porcelain beauty. Wei Xiai looked up at the sound and took a plate of watermelon from Zhang Ping. The skin was peeled off, and the flesh was cut into evenly sized pieces. It was placed on the plate. It was bright red and looked very appetizing. Wei Xiai laughed. How can I be so weak? You, on the other hand, are paying less and less attention to your appearance. Look at Zhang Ping's attire. He was dressed in coarse linen clothes, and his long hair was wrapped in a cloth. He also had a wet face cloth on his head to block the sun. Why else would they say that Zixiao is an immortal who descended from the heavens, and we are mere mortals made of mud? Xiao Guang was panting heavily. His clothes were drenched in sweat again and again. The skin that was exposed was tanned to a dark brown color. He laughed and teased Wei Xiai. Zixiao, look at Shiheng and then look at Guang. One is darker than the other. On the other hand, your skin is still as white as snow. I am very jealous when I see it. Xiao Guang had only joined Wanzhou later, but he, Wei Xiai, and Zhang Ping had lived and eaten together at the construction site in Shangjing for a year, so they naturally had a deep bond. Wei Xiai smiled. His skin glowed faintly under the sunlight. He was as pure as a celestial being. The above were the wails of the audience in the blue bullet screen. Although the Red Army had an absolute advantage, the endless stream of handsome male idols still attracted a portion of the blue audience. Among the many male idols, Wei Xi's looks were the most outstanding. Because he had appeared on the live stream a few times, he was the most valuable. Jiang Pingji had boldly grabbed Wei Xi's collar and bit his collarbone. This action broke the hearts of the blue audience. What was even more heartbreaking was that they did not know if Jiang Pingji did it on purpose. Not only did she grab Wei Xi's collar, but she also blocked their view. She definitely did it on purpose, right? Compared to the wails of the blue audience, the red audience was laughing and making noise. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Hey, hey, hey! Our little pig finally knows how to kiss cabbages. Father is so happy. Tudafetio. It's not easy. I've been following the live stream for almost 7 years. My daughter's first kiss has finally been given out. Emo Lingyin. Bah, what kind of first kiss is this? I've been looking forward to the streamer cooking this frog, Beauty Ci. The streamer hesitated and refused to bite him. May I ask, who would boil hot water for several years? If you want to bite him, then bite him. What kind of hero is blocking the camera? They only saw Jiang Pingji take a bite of Wei Ci, but they did not see any extra skin on him. How infuriating. Iji Sabao. You don't understand. This is called possessiveness. If I had a boyfriend like Beauty Ci, I would be petty too. Mingshi Yaya. If I had a boyfriend like Beauty Ci, I would have knocked him out and dragged him to bed to make him cry. Jiang Pingji looked at the bullet screen and smiled without saying a word. Chapter 913. Jiang Pingji's return to Wanzhou was a spur-of-the-moment idea, so she didn't inform the people in Wanzhou. When Su Ku saw Jiang Pingji standing in front of him, he was so scared that he almost dropped the document in his hand. Su Ku was shocked. Why did my lord suddenly return from Chongzhou? Jiang Pingji laughed as she took off her bamboo hat to block the sun. She said, time was tight, so I had to come by myself. Su Ku was speechless. Even so, my lord shouldn't have traveled alone. If anything happened on the way, Jiang Pingji replied with a smile. I'm afraid the person who can beat your lord hasn't been born yet. I have to come by myself for what I have to do. No one else can replace me. On the way back, I went to Shangjing to see Zixiao and the others. The construction of the provincial government is going smoothly. Su Ku was helpless. He wanted to say something more, but seeing her forehead covered in hot sweat, he could only get up and make tea for her to cool down. Jiang Pingji took the tea and asked casually, by the way, has Xiaoyu written to Xuanmei recently? Su Ku's face showed some warmth, but there was still some guilt in his eyes. He said he writes once a month. She's doing well in Hejian. Since the wedding, he and Xuanmei had been living in separate places all year round. How could sending letters be enough? He missed her very much. Fortunately, he had enough work to do. He didn't have much time to think about it. Jiang Pingji thought about it and said, Find a time to send someone to bring Xuanmei and your aunt to Wanzhou. Suke looked surprised. After a while, he said in a low voice, "But the person behind Takshu hasn't." Xuanmei was placed in Hejian so that she could avoid Takshu. Suke knew about this. Coincidentally, Hejian County was far away from the chaos of war, and the situation in Wanzhou was unsettled, so he was at ease to let his new wife stay in her hometown. Later, the situation in Wanzhou stabilized, but Takshu had never been resolved. He was worried that bringing Xuanmei over would harm her. If it weren't for these concerns, he would have brought Xuanmei and his aunt over when Qiguan Rang brought his wife and daughter to Wanzhou. I've already thought about how to deal with Takshu. Jiang Pingji took a sip of tea, and her expression became a little indifferent. Takshu is not the key. I can't let you be alone forever. Being married is better than being unmarried, right? No matter what, you're a man. It's not good if you don't have a wife by your side. I understand men very well. I'm afraid that you can't bear the loneliness, and will look for a new lover, which will disappoint Xuanmei's sincerity. What hurts the most to a new driver? Even though he had gotten a driver's license, he still had to walk to work. He felt like he had gotten a fake driving license. Jiang Pingji's eyes became dishonest, and Suke was so angry that he wanted to hit her. My lord knows a lot, he said sarcastically. Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. That's true. No matter what, your lord is an old customer who roams the brothels. When it came to bickering, Suke was no match for Jiang Pingji. Why did my lord suddenly think of this? Jiang Pingji said, Can't you be considerate to your subordinates? The truth was that Huijun had been pregnant for 10 months and gave birth to a son and a daughter. She counted the next generation of the members of the team with her fingers. Before he went to Chongzhou to take office, Shang Guanwan was pregnant. Qiguan Rang had a daughter. Feng Jin yearned for a second child. Feng Zhen's Fengyi seemed to have a genetic mutation. Yang Saifenglia did not want to get married. Xiao Guang already had a family. Zhang Ping was an unmarried member of the Keting clan. Meng Hun had no intention of remarrying. Jiang Nongqin wholeheartedly cared for Jiang Pingji and did not consider marriage. When she counted to Suku, she suddenly thought of the young couple who lived in different places. She had already found out who the mastermind was. There was no point in keeping Takshu. In order not to fall out with the mastermind, Jiang Pingji did not plan to do anything to Takshu at the moment. She planned to find an excuse to send Takshu away from her. After Suke heard this, he secretly rolled his eyes. Who would believe this reason? Right. I came back this time for the Golden Scale book. Suke raised his eyebrows. Golden Scale Academy? What's wrong with it? Jiang Pingji said. A while ago, Feng Zhen's son wrote a letter to his father, complaining about the Xia Yin Shu. Suke laughed. Fengyi is extremely talented, intelligent, and eager to learn. Master Cheng and Master Yuanjing praised him. He started learning early, so the Xia Yin Shu should be nothing to him. Why did my lord rush back from so far away for this? Fengyi is fine, but the other children do not have a foundation, so they are stumbling in their studies. Even with the guidance of a famous teacher, their learning progress is still slow. The phonetic transcription of the Xia Yin Shu, regardless of whether it was direct or indirect, required the learner to have a certain literacy foundation. Apart from Fengyi, the other students of the Golden Scale Academy were all orphans of martyrs who had died in battle. Even martyrs were illiterate, let alone their children. Literacy is difficult, so is reading. My lord is kind enough to provide them with learning conditions for free. This is already a blessing to our ancestors. Suke sighed. Every student goes through this. If they do not learn well, they can only blame themselves for not working hard enough. They could only learn by rote. If they could not, it could only be said that the students did not work hard enough. That may not be the case, Jiang Pingji said. Xiaoyu, invite the teachers here. I have something to discuss with them. It would no longer be a fantasy to break the monopoly of the landowning households. That would be incredible. I spent so much effort to come up with the pinyin annotation for the sake of the children who have difficulty in enlightenment. To others it might be a rare treasure, But to me it might not be the case. I won't keep it to myself. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, currently, I want to try it out in the Golden Scale Academy for a period of time. During this period of time, I'll have to trouble you to completely perfect it. In another half a year, the children's foundations would be solid. At that time, I plan to open the Golden Scale Pavilion and allow students to borrow some basic books from the Golden Scale Pavilion. Chung Chung was surprised and said, but the Golden Scale Pavilion? Most of the people who were qualified to enter the Golden Scale Pavilion were adult men. How could a group of children sneak in? Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly understood something. The worry on his face turned into joy. If a group of children sneaked in, the adult scholars would naturally be curious and ask questions. When the time came, the children would show their skills. They would definitely be able to scare people. The Lord wanted to make use of the scholars' mouths to advertise for the Golden Scale Academy for free. As long as outsiders saw results from this group of children, there would be much less resistance to popularizing the pinyin annotation. Jiang Pingji smiled and said nothing. Master Yuanjing asked, what name have you thought of? Jiang Pingji cast a suspicious look at him. What name? You came up with this pinyin annotation method. Naturally, you should give it a name. It was a good thing to leave a name in history. Many people were envious of it, but could not come. Jiang Pingji was speechless. She was not good at giving names, but someone liked to let her do it. Why don't we just call it Xian Yun? Master Yuanjing glanced sideways and asked her with his eyes. Was there really no need to add a surname, or something in front of Xian Yun? This was a good opportunity to leave a name in history. It was not a cabbage on the street. If she missed this opportunity, there would be no more. Jiang Pingji thought about it. She saw the contents of the bullet screen in the streaming room, and immediately changed her mind. Let's just call it Xian Yun of Chinese. Master Yuanjing looked away and nodded. Very good. With Master Yuanjing and the others around, Jiang Pingji was not worried about the Golden Scale Academy. Master Yuanjing and the others were full of fighting spirit. They were thinking about how to show off their skills. Jiang Pingji took the opportunity to sneak away. Iohei, streamer, you're such a hands-off boss. Why didn't your group of little princesses fall out with you? Funny tree you and I. The little princesses are no match for the streamer. Their combat power is not in the same dimension. Givenchy little sheepskin. Where are you going, streamer? Jiang Pingji asked the maid to bring some water to wipe her cheeks, neck and arms. Host V. I'm going to see Huijun and her baby. When Jiang Pingji saw Huijun, she was sitting in the corridor reading a book. There was a wooden pram beside her. Huijun. Huijun heard the noise and looked in the direction of the sound. Her peaceful eyes gradually lit up. Why are you back, Langjun? Jiang Pingji said. I'm back to handle official business. I heard that women need to take care of themselves after giving birth. Why are you outside? I've given birth for 3 or 4 months. My body is recovering well. I don't have so many taboos. Huijun smiled faintly and pushed the pram into the house. The 2 fair and tender babies were sleeping soundly. They were not awakened at all. She said, the sun in the courtyard is strong. Langjun, don't stay outside. Which one is the younger sister? Jiang Pingji asked as she lifted the diapers of the 2 babies. Both of the children were as fair as jade. Their chubby cheeks were pinkish, and their white cheeks were pinkish. In comparison, the girl was slightly smaller than the boy. Her facial features were more delicate. This is the younger sister. When she was just born, she was as small as a kitten. Her cries were also delicate. I almost thought I couldn't raise her. Jiang Pingji tried to pinch the girl's face. The little girl's head tilted slightly. She opened her mouth and blew a bubble. The audience in the streaming room had been charmed by the 2 babies. They turned into weird uncles and aunties. They kept howling. Have you named them? Not yet. I'm waiting for you to give them names. Huijun smiled. Crying rain in the cloud. Streamer, can I give you a suggestion? You should let these children attend classes at different times. Otherwise, it'll be so tiring. Li Wushuang. That's right. After all, there's a limit to a person's attention span. They're still kids, and their energy is incomparable to that of adults. Those teachers would lecture for the entire morning. Not only could the teachers not bear it, but the students were also more tired, and their learning efficiency was lower. Jiang Pingji secretly watched the students in class for 2 days. The audience was forced to watch for 2 days too. After watching it on the first day, many viewers expressed that they could not take it anymore. There was no other reason for it. A single class was too long. The Jinlin Academy was basically run by Cheng Cheng and the others. Jiang Pingji did not know much about the academy. It was her first time attending a class in person. After listening for a whole morning, she found many drawbacks. She combined the suggestions of the audience and wrote a serious summary. Master Yuanjing had decades of teaching experience. He could be considered a leading figure in the field of education. However, he had a broad temperament. When Jiang Pingji suggested something to him, he listened carefully. If it was feasible, he would correct it. If it was not feasible, he would carefully discuss the pros and cons with Jiang Pingji. Not to mention anything else, just the spirit and attitude was worth learning from. Master Yuanjing listened for a while. He asked doubtfully, "Magistrate Liu, do you mean to divide the classes?" Jiang Pingji said, "That's exactly what I mean. I observe that every class lasts at least 2 hours. Even adults feel tired, let alone a group of children. If they learn in a state of exhaustion, how much can the students learn? In my opinion, it's better to divide the classes and set a time. For example, a class lasts half an hour or a quarter of an hour. After the class, the children will be given some time to rest and adjust before the next class. The knowledge they learn in each class can be different. Knowledge teaching can be interspersed. In this way, the pressure on the teachers can be reduced, and the children won't be tired from learning. It's like you can't become fat with one bite. You have to take one step at a time to travel 10,000 miles. Master Yuanjing was stunned. He carefully considered Jiang Pingji's suggestion. The students he taught were usually above 10 years old. Most of the students in the Golden Scale Academy were between 5 and 7 years old. Hearing Jiang Pingji's words, Master Yuanjing felt that his previous education method was indeed not suitable for young children. Lanting, let me think about it. Master Yuanjing did not have the final say in the Golden Scale Academy. If he wanted to adjust the class schedule, he had to communicate with a few teachers. How could the combat power of the two of them be as simple as 1 + 1? It was estimated that before Jiang Pingji reached Chongzhou, these jumping clowns would have already been caught by their inescapable net. Reality proved that Jiang Pingji's guess was not wrong. "My lord, you look radiant. When Zheng and I, on the other hand, have been restless for more than a month." Feng Zhen had a pair of dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he had been sucked dry by a demoness. "Why are you all acting like this?" Jiang Pingji rushed to Chongzhou without stopping. Along the way, she didn't have time to take a detour to Siwei Ci. When she reached Chongzhou, she saw that her 2 right-hand men looked like they hadn't slept for a long time. Wen Zheng's left arm was even tied with a white cloth. Those people are planning to fight to the death. Previously, they sent men to assassinate Wen Zheng. When the assassination failed, they instigated others to cause trouble. Fortunately, Han Mei and Wen Zheng were discussing the matter of farming and recruiting soldiers. That was how I managed to survive. When Qiguan Rang was assassinated, Jiang Pingji was still on the road, so she didn't receive the news. What? Haven't these people been arrested? Jiang Pingji glanced at Qiguan Rang. When his eyes met hers, he winked. His gaze carried a hint of meaning. She was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She thought more than Feng Zhen. Why did Qiguan Rang have to be the one who was assassinated? One had to know that Qiguan Rang's position was impartial. In comparison, Feng Zhen's hatred was greater. She was afraid that someone was trying to fish in troubled waters. Jiang Pingji snorted. Feng Zhen thought she didn't understand and explained. Although those people were arrested, my lord, the relationship between the aristocratic families in Chongzhou is very complicated. They are either relatives or friends, or they are students and former officials. Not only are they friends, but they are also bound by blood ties that cannot be severed. Previously, they could still bear with it when they only locked up people. Now it's different. Lives are at stake. How can they sit still? When Zheng's danger is just the beginning. We don't know what will happen in the future. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath. She said calmly, "You're wrong. They will betray the country for their personal and family interests, and collude with the northern borderline. Of course, they will also get close to me and abandon those abandoned children for the sake of making others jealous." Feng Zhen asked. "Then what does my lord mean?" Chapter 9:18. Feng Zhen smiled bitterly. This was indeed his lord's unique style of doing things. Killing was just a matter of nodding to the ground. The most troublesome part was dealing with the aftermath. Seeing Feng Zhen's expression, Jiang Pingji furrowed her brows and asked him, "Zisher doesn't agree?" Feng Zhen shook his head. It wasn't that he didn't agree, he was just worried. The aristocratic families in Chongzhou weren't big, but the relationships between them were very complicated. If the lord chose to cut them all off, it would cause more trouble. But if she didn't do anything about it, where would the lord's dignity be? "Why don't we just kill the bandit leaders?" Feng Zhen suggested against his will. He had been with Jiang Pingji for a long time, and his preferences had changed. Compared to intricate schemes, he preferred simple and violent methods. But as a strategist, he couldn't act on impulse. He had to prioritize the lord's interests. "There's no need. Just kill them all." Jiang Pingji's eyes shone with a cold glint. Letting a tiger return to the mountains will lead to endless trouble. In a place like Chongzhou, the temple is small, but the wind is strong. The relationships between them are complicated. If we only kill the bandit leaders, it's the same as letting them preserve their strength. As long as they are alive, they can make a comeback if they seize the opportunity. Rather than that, we might as well kill them all. If we only kill the bandit leaders, the remaining people will still cause trouble. If that's the case, we might as well uproot them, and not leave any future troubles. These families are a lesson to be learned from. Punish them harshly, and let others see what happens when they betray the country. Since Jiang Pingji had said so, Feng Zhen naturally wouldn't object. He narrowed his eyes slyly, and his lips curled into a scheming smile. In the days when Jiang Pingji wasn't around, he had suffered many grievances. Now that he could get back at her, how could he not be happy? Feng Zhen obeyed her orders, and went to make arrangements. Only Jiang Pingji and the silent Qiguan Rang were left. "Are you all right? Does your wound still hurt?" Jiang Pingji asked softly. Qiguan Rang's stiff lips twitched. He said, "This time, I really suffered an unexpected disaster." Jiang Pingji understood the meaning behind his words. She restrained the smile on her lips and resumed her cold expression. "Do you think the people who assassinated you were the aristocrats of Chongzhou or?" Jiang Pingji asked Qiguan Rang in a low voice. Qiguan Rang thought for a while, his brows furrowed, and he said in a low voice, "I'm afraid it's a borrowed knife to kill. On the surface, it's the aristocratic families of Chongzhou who have lost their minds and sent assassins. But in the dark, there's another master. That person is extremely cautious. If I didn't take precautions in advance, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to find any clues." The original meaning of this sentence should be that the scholar officials should not receive preferential treatment in sentencing, and the commoners should not be excluded from etiquette. But as the times changed, this sentence became the golden medal and privilege of the aristocratic class. Now, it was twisted to mean that the scholar officials had the privilege of not being punished, and the commoners did not have the right to be treated with courtesy. Although the aristocratic families in Chongzhou were nouveau riches in the aristocratic circle, they were still above the commoners. Jiang Pingji wanted the lives of their entire clan because of the crime of secretly contacting the northern borderline. It was unreasonable. According to their thinking, a heavy punishment would suffice. Why would there be a need to resort to violence? Based on this woman will definitely lose the hearts of the people. Sooner or later, she will die without a burial. Faced with such a statement, the clear-headed people smiled bitterly. They were very clear that as long as Lu Shi held the military power in his hands, the aristocratic families in Chongzhou would not be able to hurt her. A few scholars found Jiang Pingji together and advised her. They talked loudly, and the core meaning was that she was in the wrong. If it was a commoner who had colluded with the enemy and committed treason, they deserved to die. However, the person who had secretly contacted the northern borderline was an aristocratic family. They only needed to be taught a harsh lesson, fined and punished. There was no need to take their lives. Dongqing had a law. The aristocratic families could use enough money to exempt them from the death penalty. Even if it was a crime like secretly contacting the northern borderline, as long as they could afford it, they could be acquitted according to the law. Jiang Pingji looked at them coldly for a long time. After an hour, "Are you all thirsty?" The scholars echoed each other. They were eloquent, but unfortunately, there was a hole in their brains. The scholars bowed to Jiang Pingji and stood proudly on the spot. They said, "Magistrate Liu, please reconsider." Jiang Pingji said coldly, "Looks like you're not thirsty. That's fine. I don't want to throw you into the well in the backyard and dirty my water. Someone, throw out these fellows who have an undeserved reputation. From now on, if they dare to come to our door again, break their legs." After the scholars heard this, their faces turned ashen. Jiang Pingji narrowed her eyes dangerously. "Throw them out." The scholars wanted to say something, but when they saw the guards in armor and brandishing their blades, they were as quiet as chickens, not daring to make a sound. It was at this moment that Fu Wang and Li Yun stepped in with a bloody aura. The scholars saw them and felt uneasy. "Is it done?" Jiang Pingji asked. Chapter 919. Jiang Pingji was also afraid that a long delay would bring trouble. After making up her mind, she let Fu Wang and Li Yun lead the troops to confiscate the houses and arrest the people. According to Dongqing's practice, confiscating property and exterminating 3 clans meant confiscating property. Confiscating property was easy to understand. It was nothing more than confiscating all property, including land, real estate, gold and silver, slave contracts. Exterminating 3 clans referred to the paternal, maternal, and wife clans. If Dongqing's imperial power was stable, something as big as confiscating property and exterminating a clan needed the permission of the court. However, Dongqing was now ruled by the emperor. It was good enough that one edict could affect the entire imperial city. Why would Jiang Pingji care about him? Confiscating property and exterminating a clan was something she could do. However, she did not go too far. According to Dongqing's current laws, exterminating a clan was a rule. The offenders and the men in the family would all be executed. The women could be exempted from the death penalty. However, they would be made prostitutes for the officials or sent to the army as camp prostitutes. This outcome was even more horrifying than death. Jiang Pingji would rather give them a quick death. She did not want to use such methods to humiliate a group of weak women. After thinking about it, Jiang Pingji said, "Get someone to register all these women and demote them to commoners. Send them back to their parents' homes in private." The atmosphere in Chongzhou was more open. Women would not crazily treat men as their sky, let alone follow the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. Jiang Pingji gave them a way out and did not take their lives. She only sent them back to their parents' homes. This was already a great kindness. When the limelight was over, they could still get married again. By doing so, she subtly pacified the women's families so that they could not vent their anger. The catastrophe in Chongzhou lasted for more than a month. From the top to the bottom, everyone was in danger. While the gentry in Chongzhou were anxious and fearful, the Cui family, who had long boarded Jiang Pingji's pirate ship, were happy to see their teeth but not their eyes. The head of the Cui family, Cui Yu, even chatted with his friends in private. He said that this was the most successful business he had ever done. Although they gave up the land, they reaped even more benefits. The returns were far higher than the costs. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the first year of Qingzong. It had been a year since Jiang Pingji took over Chongzhou. In the past year, she had gone from being looked down upon to being a great demon that everyone feared. She had Chongzhou in her hands. As for Yang Si, who had been thrown to Hu County by Jiang Pingji, he was even more impressive. He never expected that Yang Tao, who he thought was completely useless, would show his sharp teeth at this moment. Under Yin Lin's orderly command, the coup was like a thunderstorm. Everyone was at a loss as to what to do. Yang Tao's 3,000 men of sacrifice became the decisive force in the coup. Yin Lin forged documents and military orders, mobilized troops from all sides, and controlled the armory and key departments. Before the false emperor, Prince Changshou, could react, they were already surrounded at the place where the sacrificial ceremony was held. By the time the false emperor wanted to mobilize troops to defend himself, it was already too late. A figure flashed across Qiguanrang's mind. He said, "It's obvious that this was a premeditated coup. The person who set it up was shrewd and ruthless. He was very good at playing with people's hearts. He was obviously at a disadvantage, but he was able to take advantage of every opportunity to attack the false emperor again and again. He made it impossible for the false emperor to calm down." Yang Tao was brave, but he lacked strategy. Even though he had grown a little after Yang Jian's death, he was still far from being as shrewd as the false emperor. In my opinion, all of this must have been done by an expert. I can't think of anyone else other than Yin Lin. Qiguanrang's eyes flashed with coldness as he thought about this. He knew that Yin Lin was not a simple man, but he didn't expect him to be so capable. He had helped Yang Tao turn the tables from a disadvantageous position to an advantage. Now he could control the entire Zhengzhou effortlessly. What a pity. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have let Yin Lin live. Jiang Pingji said calmly. I also think that he was the one behind all of this. I have to say that he is indeed a meticulous and shrewd person, but he was able to help Yang Tao turn the tables. It was 50% strength and 50% luck. If it weren't for the fact that the Mengs and Zhengzhou realized that they couldn't help the false emperor and withdrew their troops back to Zhengzhou, Yin Lin wouldn't have been able to do this alone. This is fate, Qiguanrang said. I'm afraid he will be a formidable opponent. What are you afraid of? Jiang Pingji said. One person's energy is limited. No matter how capable Yin Lin was, he wasn't a god. Jiang Pingji stayed in the north, but the forces in the south of Dongqing were constantly changing. Yang Tao turned the tables and took over Zhengzhou. Huang Song, who was in Haozhou, didn't want to be outdone either. He took over the entire Haozhou. The Su brothers in Jia County fought amongst themselves for a while. It was hard to tell who would win. In the end, they all set their sights on their old neighbor Hu County. The chief of Hu County was Wu Ma Shang, an old friend from the Huangshui meeting. Chapter 920. The mountains and rivers of his old country had been destroyed, and the people's lives were in dire straits. And Shui thought that he could rely on his military strength to reclaim his old country, but he had greatly underestimated the situation within Nanxing. Nanxing Jiangzhou, the barbarians of the four factions of Nanman, only knew how to plunder and didn't know how to govern. Wherever they conquered, they would plunder and kill wantonly. He came empty-handed, but he left with a lot of money. Countless human heads and weeping women hung on the back of his horse. The heads were evidence of their military strength, and the women were spoils of war for them to vent their desires and show off their power. And Shui wandered to Dongqing, and only managed to gather 6,000 men after much scheming. He thought that he had some confidence, but the situation in Nanxing was far worse than when he left. The aristocratic families and commoners couldn't stand the violence of Nanman and rose up in revolt. If they focused on the outside world, Nanxing might still be saved, but the enemies had yet to retreat, and civil war had broken out. And Shui brought 6,000 men and sufficient rations to support Jiangzhou of Nanxing. He was originally from Jiangzhou of Nanxing. This wasn't just his homeland, but also where Madame An had built her connections. If he developed in Jiangzhou, not only could he use Madame An's remaining connections, but he could also get help from his old friends. In the beginning, An Shui's development was not bad. He used the teachings of the Red Lotus Group to recruit many militias and strengthen himself. But he quickly ran into a wall. Because of this, An Shui lost more than half of his troops, and only 3,000 were left. Other than An Shui, there were two other aristocratic families and a militia force in Jiangzhou. and Shui chose to work with the aristocratic family that was on good terms with Madame. But unexpectedly, they had ulterior motives. Although Shui was intelligent, he wasn't good at scheming. He was unknowingly tricked by the other party. Shui and Duoshi. Shui meant worry. The elders had given Shui the nickname Duoshi. It sounded tacky, but it was full of good wishes. They knew that this person was destined to have a difficult life. In his previous life, he had toiled for more than a decade, and in the end, he had risked everything to ask Wei Ci for help. He had taken over half of Nansheng. Now, he wasn't as down and out as he would be in the future, but he was still unlucky. Although he was from Nansheng, the troops he brought were all from Dongqing. In the eyes of the feudal lords in Nansheng, Shui was not on the right side. How could an outsider fight with them for power? If it wasn't a pretense, then it was the thought of using Shui to do his dirty work. He only treated Shui as a spear. At first, Shui did not realize this. When he ran into a wall and lost half of his troops, he suddenly realized. Shui had just passed the age of 30, so he could still withstand such a blow. However, his eyes couldn't help but turn red. However, after this setback, he also realized his shortcomings. He couldn't outcalculate others, and he didn't have a strategist by his side. His sworn brothers were also impulsive people. Such a combination could be easily manipulated by others, and the slightest provocation could ruin the whole thing. Shui thought for a moment. He planned to use his old friendship to invite a famous scholar to help him. However, Shui had no manpower, no land, and no money. Moreover, she had just suffered a defeat. Who would be willing to assist a lord like this? Even if Shui's status was illustrious, the entire family had been wiped out by the barbarians, and Shui's wife and children had even been humiliated and killed by the barbarians. Was such a failed man worthy of the loyalty of others? Thus, every time Shui came to invite them, many famous people would either avoid meeting him or refuse him. Shui was not a thick-skinned person. He knew that others did not like his conditions, so he could only return resentfully. On one hand, he led his subordinates to seek refuge everywhere, and on the other, he looked for a chance to turn things around. Finally, he found his chance. I heard that Master Yuanjing's disciple is traveling nearby to study. Shui's eyes burned. He remembered the performance of Master Yuanjing's first disciple, Cheng Jing, during the Huangshui meeting. The fire in his heart burned even more. Traveling? What's going on here? Which idiot came here to study? My lord, did you hear wrongly? Although Dongqing was chaotic, it was not as chaotic as Nansheng. There were barbarians everywhere who wreaked havoc and plundered. A scholar traveling to a war-torn country to study was not traveling thousands of miles to read thousands of books. It was clearly rushing to find the king of hell to reincarnate. Shui said, whether it's true or not, we should at least give it a try. The subordinates beside him were nervous. They really did not think highly of Shui's plan. Shui smiled. Master Yuanjing has a total of 4 disciples. His first disciple, Chengjing Cheng Yumo, now works for Huangsong of Haozhou. His youngest disciple Wei Ci Wei Zixiao works for Luxi of Wanzhou. The remaining 2 are Han Yu, Han Wenbin, and Lu Zheng Lu Xiaoyin. I heard that Han Yu has accepted the appointment of Su Bei, the eldest grandson of the Su family in Jie County of Dongqing. Then the remaining one, Lu Zheng? Never heard of him. Everyone shook their heads like a rattle drum. Lu Zheng was really not famous. Among Master Yuanjing's 4 disciples, Cheng Jing and Han Yu were from the famous Langye family. Wei Ci's status was slightly lower, and Lu Zheng was the son of a hunter. Shui had never heard of Lu Zheng's name, but he had tried to get close to Cheng Jing during the Huangshui meeting. After asking around, he found out the names of Master Yuanjing's 4 disciples. I have a chance because I have never heard of him. Shui took a deep breath and said, I heard that Lu Zheng intends to visit the governor of Jiang Prefecture. The governor of Jiang Prefecture is my childhood friend. I know his temperament very well. He has a very strong sense of family background, but he does a good job on the surface. He won't look down on Lu Zheng in front of him, nor will he chase him away. For the sake of being wise, he will even put on a show and appoint Lu Zheng. But according to my understanding of the governor of Jiang Prefecture, He will never put the son of a hunter in an important position. Master Yuanjing's disciple must have something special about him, and his temperament must be more arrogant than ordinary people. In my opinion, Lu Zheng will definitely not be able to accept such cold treatment. In other words, Lu Zheng's setback gave Yin Cui a chance to enter the governor's eyes. A few subordinates listened to Yin Cui's words. They did not say anything on the surface, but they were secretly disapproving. In their opinion, there must be something wrong with a scholar who went to a war-torn country to study. However, his lord liked him and wanted to recruit him wholeheartedly. It turned out that Yin Cui's guess was right. Unexpectedly, Lu Zheng also saw that the governor of Jiang Prefecture was not reliable. He rejected the governor's appointment and continued to study. Yin Cui was anxious and immediately paid a visit with generous gifts. "I won't see you." Lu Zheng wore a wide-sleeved cloak and a cloth scarf on his head. He was unadorned and looked like a poor scholar. The boy servant blinked and said, "Sir, this is his second time. I won't see him even if he comes 20 times, much less 2 times. Lu Zheng narrowed his eyes. He had grown a beard now. Although his face was still tender, he was far more mature than before. The boy servant raised his head and said, "In ancient times, there were 3 attendants who came out of the mountains. Sir, you won't move even after 20 attendants? Study well and don't drop your bag. You'll make me feel awkward." The boy's servant stuck out his tongue and followed Lu Zheng obediently. He did not dare to let Yin Cui enter again. "Why don't you like him, sir? The timing is not right." "Ha! He still has the arrogance of a landowning household. That alone makes him unworthy of my consideration." Then when will it be enough? That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.